G'day, Forest Folk. AOS Coach here, and we are talking all things Sylvaneth. It would not be a Laurie Huggett-Wilde show if there wasn't technical difficulties. One time we had to stream in a garden. One time he was late. This time we had some tech issues, but most importantly, this guest is an absolute legend. You have done all three Sylvaneth battletomes with me, and it's an honor to have you coming back through the Awaken Wildwood and sharing with me what you think about the new Sylvaneth book. And I know you've been playing with it for a while, so it'll be great to get your perspectives changing from the last book to the new book. What some of the new rules like Strike and Fade and the Season of War, and we've had new models like the Gossamer Archers and Lady of Vines. There's so much that's happened in this book since we last spoke, and like always, we're going to talk about your perspective and kind of how you're seeing it from probably a competitive lens. But Laurie, you've done incredibly well on the scene. You had a small little stint playing Chaos, which was unfortunate, but we'll put it to the side. I'm going to ignore that you didn't go on a Chaos sabbatical.
I wanted a little bit of variety, a little bit of change. So I did. I had my I think I did what I do. I did Saves the Darkness, Iron Jaws, Lumineth back to back, basically, just to variety is the spice of life, as they say. So I did stray from the trees for a little bit, but now I'm back, and all the better for it.
The Heralds of War have called, the seasons have bloomed, I guess. You're in the, I don't know, would you call yourself in the reaping phase, or would you reckon, what season best describes you at the moment?
I was saying to you before we started that I've just had my first kid, so at the moment I very much feel like in the Everdusk stage of everything is tired and dying, but that's a separate thing.
And thank you for everyone who's joined the live stream, by the way. Absolute, you go all legend. Thanks for joining, and I'm really looking forward to this because I remember the second edition book, and it felt like pushing poo uphill. It was like, this has gotten overly complicated. There was woods and wildwoods, and a lot of the ways that you used to play with Sylvaneth got really restricted to a point where I think Sylvaneth kind of dropped off quite significantly from the competitive scene, and the people who used to kind of be the beacons for Sylvaneth just stopped playing, just completely stopped playing the faction. And I've noticed on the tournament scene, Sylvaneth is rising, not only in popularity but in competitiveness. You're seeing them more and more in the top 8, but more importantly, I think you are going to see them, because they're such a finesse army. It is going to take a little bit of time to kind of see the power come out of the book, but we are already reaping the kind of the benefits. But before I get into that, just, do you want to introduce yourself, and more importantly, what got you into Sylvaneth? I think that would be a great context setting for people who haven't seen like the myriad of shows that you've done with me on the channel.
So morning everyone. I've been playing Sylvaneth since the tome, basically since the tome first dropped. What got me initially into them, I went to my first Age of Sigmar one day down in Dorset, and I borrowed an army of Paul Buckler. And whilst I was there, Aaron Bailey, who doesn't really play anymore, but he was playing a Sylvaneth army, and I looked at them and they looked quite cool. I'm not a very good hobbyist. I'm not a very good painter. And I saw Sylvaneth and thought, well, I think I can paint that. I think I can do an okay job there, because it's lots of washes and dry brushes, and you're pretty much there. And then once I started playing them, I realized that they were exactly my play style. I really liked the way they played, and they kind of clicked. And as a result, whenever I have strayed away from them, I have found myself missing the way they play, because they do play very differently from most other armies, and like the tools that you have at your command are very different from other armies. And so whenever I have taken a sabbatical, so to speak, I've always been dragged back to them, basically. And it helps having, I think I've got 8,000 points now of Sylvaneth painted and ready to go. So it's nice being able to just write a list and go, okay, I don't need to paint anything for that. I can just put that on the table and give it a go. Done well with them over the years, and got many podiums and a few first places with them. Really, really do enjoy them, and consider myself a tree grower at heart, basically.
I love that humble flex. Yeah, I've had a couple of first places. Just dust it off the shoulder. But you are a very talented Sylvaneth player, which is why I had to get you on the channel to kind of get your thoughts on the book, because a lot has changed, both fundamentally in the allegiance ability. You have a whole bunch of new units. I think you've gotten more new units than any other faction who's gotten an update this year. I couldn't believe it. Every other faction, it's like, here's a small hero, here's a small hero, here's, the high gladiatrix, here's a little idiot hero. You're just like, cool, Gossamer Archers, the bugs, your Lancers and your Seekers, you got your Lady of Vines. It's just like, Sylvaneth got so much.
No, it's great. It's really great. And I think they're, some of them I think were a bit mixed reaction to begin with, but I think they're all really good models. I really like them.
And I'll be curious to get your thoughts too, because I know when Gossamer Archers very first came out, the internet lost its mind. It's just like, this thing is broken, all the mortal wounds. And then it's almost like when the book dropped, everyone forgot about them completely. And now it's all about Lancers and Seekers and even Kurnoth Hunters. I think it's been funny watching even like Durthu kind of get a bit of a revival. It's just like Durthu was OP. I remember the time when Durthu was like whiff central.
Yeah, which is still the case. It's still very much the case. Durthu is as Durthu does. But yeah, it's great that like so much is, because I agree on the Gossamer Archers front. I think that points and their reliability is what's keeping them out of lists for the most part. And I certainly think that the internet's reaction, shockingly, I think the internet's reaction was a bit over the top, which is unusual, because it's normally the internet world is so steady and calm in their reactions.
I certainly didn't notice it with Nurgle or Nighthorn, and I'm certainly not receiving it right now with Lumineth, that Sentinels lost their line of sight ignoring ability. It's like, oh my god, the world is ending.
The world is ended. That's that.
We're talking Sylvaneth, and I guess imagine I was new to the faction. Like, let's say I don't have the wealth of experience that you have. What are you finding with Sylvaneth right now? And like, how would you describe the book? And even what have you noticed? Like, what have you noticed going from the last book to the new book?
So the way in which they play has changed in a small but noticeable way. Which I found a little bit tough to deal with myself at times. They've always been an army of movement, so you've always been able to put your army down and then kind of go almost wherever you wanted to go. Certainly, they used to be the case. So you basically went wherever you wanted to go. I live very near to Rich Buckler, and Rich would always jokingly say to me when I was deploying, is he just doesn't bother looking where I deploy, because it's kind of irrelevant, because I'm just going to go wherever I want on the board. And so he'll work out his own deployment. There's no real point looking at how I deploy, and that's still sort of the case, that you've got a lot of flexibility about where you're going to go. I think the big thing is that you now are very much expecting to hit and run. So this new strike and fade ability, which is the new allegiance ability that we've got, means that you can hit a unit and then retreat. And I think the way the book plays now is largely around that ability, or at least that's ability you've got to make use of as much as you can. And that changes the way they play. And a few games I'll come very close to losing, or have lost, is when I haven't taken advantage of that ability correctly or enough. I always used to play the old Sylvaneth, the first tome of Sylvaneth, and actually to be fair, with the second tome as well, it was about a hard alpha. Get in your face, do enough damage or pin you in place enough that then when the grind gets on, I'm up enough by turn 3 or turn 4 that I'm going to win in the long run anyway. And the book doesn't work like that now. And occasionally I have left units in. I've left units out the board, like having committed them, and they just get taken off. And I'm like, no, I really do need to basically utilize strike and fade, almost every single time, basically. And I think that's the big thing with the new book, is you're still playing movement, you're still playing a game on another level to a lot of other armies, but you're now in a position where you're no longer pushing a large chunk of your army up the board. Instead, you're looking to really take advantage of strike and fade as much as you possibly can.
Which kind of reminds me a lot of the old Wood Elves when I went back to, because everyone knows I'm a fantasy battles person. And when you played Wood Elves, especially, I think it was around 7th edition to 8th edition, they were very much a high movement, strike and fade, like shoot and disappear completely. And, spreading out the force, like you go chasing a particular model and, then another unit comes at you at a different side. And it's really pulling apart your castles and, goes back to your high movement. And when I remember the last version of Sylvaneth, the most competitive lists, I think, were the Dreadwood lists, if I remember correctly. And often, like, people would throw at you, 6 or 9 Kurnoth hunters with size, maybe another 6, either 3 and 3, or a block of 6 of swords or something. You know, you might have the Warsong Revenant, or you'd have like a branch wraith kind of hiding in the woods. And it was very much get into your face, you know, put down the roots of a Kurnoth hunter and just like grind you and pin you while things are chipping away at mortal wounds. People are summoning up dryads, and it was very much a grindy focus, almost like a Nurgle to a degree. But very much now it's about striking, it's about positioning, it's about movement, and it's very much a game of 3D chess. I think it's very much about even 4D chess. Like, you're looking at this and you're not playing Age of Sigmar. You're like almost semi-KO in a sense.
Sort of, yeah, to an extent. I think what's kind of building on that, what's interesting now, if you look at the way in which my kill points used to be in the old book, would be that I would normally get tabled and I might kill about 1,000 points, and now it's like I quite often will lose nothing, because like if you're playing someone who's not been played against Sylvaneth before, or hasn't got the tools to deal with you, you can hit them and basically they can just can't touch your army at all. And that's really different from the old way. But those lists you were describing, and even if you go back to the first book, like my favorite list in the first book was 70 Dryads of Phoenix, and you'd put that in the opponent's face, and they'd get through them. And so actually, I would often get tabled, but I'd have scored so many points in the first few turns that was that basically. And so on both of those, you really are. I know other people play them differently, but I'd commit so much, and then you take out enough to basically win the long run. And that's not the case now. Like, as I say, I've had games where I've lost a unit of tree revenants, maybe 2, and that's basically it, because you are just hitting, you're retreating, you're going around the board where you want to go, and your opponent can't follow you.
I remember Winterleaf. I remember the Phoenix coming in from Winterleaf. I'll never forget playing Liam Burnett Blue when I was playing with Moon Clan Grots before Gloomspite Gitz got a book, and he was loving just summoning dryads. And back in the day, it's actually kind of funny because they've kind of returned to form almost, that you'd get a -1 to hit penalty against dryads if they were 1 inch, not wholly within, just within. So you could like Congo line a whole block of 30 dryads and just have one idiot from the woods, and then like as you're doing damage, he's just pulling back towards the woods and then regrowing them. Like, I hate you so much.
I miss those days. That was amazing. Yeah, just I'd say one dryad, and then 20 dryads strung out at the other side of the board, and like, well, because this one guy here is near Wildwood, and -1 to hit. Good luck. Good times.
No. I have battle scars, folks. Going back even to like Stormcast. When Stormcast, you could drop into your line, pin you with Staunch Defender, like drop in combat, not even charge you. It was crazy times. But what do you thought of the new book? Do you think they've improved in value? Do you think that they're kind of similar? I know you mentioned their play styles different, but like, what's your general observation of this updated 2022 book?
So I think they're really good. I think straight off the bat, they're a very good book. I think it's been really interesting seeing the reaction to them, because I do personally think the reaction is slightly too positive not too positive, slightly too arguing that they are broken, or that they are. I know some people think they're the strongest book out there at the moment. I think some of their weaknesses remain the weaknesses that they've basically always had. That they really dislike a double. If you get doubled, then you can often find yourself in quite a bad position, and they are very expensive. And I think I think once your opponent knows how to play against you, they become such a harder army to play with. I think that's the really big thing, and that's why you will get players who just get taken off. Players get taken off, and then they come away and they're like, well, that's a ridiculous army. So a ridiculous army. They are way overpowered. They need a huge nerf. And it's like, well, no, you just haven't played against them enough. Like, they play very differently, and Strike and Fade. Strike and Fade is like the ultimate NPE negative play experience if you don't know what to do about it. Like, first time you play it, like, right, you've got 6 scythes or Dirthu. They teleport from one side of the board to the other. hit me, kill me, go away. Do that 3 times and I've lost my whole army. Like when you have that and that happens against you, like, right, well, that's terrible. Like what can I do? When you start realizing the counters to them, then it really makes things quite tough for Sylvaneth. So I think they are a very good book with loads of options, which is very strong. But I think once you start getting onto top tables against top players, it always gets harder, obviously, the higher up you get in competitive tables. But I think it's a really steep increase for Sylvaneth, basically, compared to other army books. When you start playing very good players who know how your book plays, it becomes a lot harder, is what I would say.
Yeah, and you're going to talk to us later in the show about how I beat you. You're going to tell me about how to defeat, because I think that's part of why I did this channel as well, right? Because there's one thing to talk to awesome people like you and hear how to make Sylvaneth better. But if I'm listening to this on the other coin to go, well, I don't play Sylvaneth, but I've got people in my community who are doing really well. Or when I go to my next tournament, what are the tricks I need to look out for against Sylvaneth? And how do I understand Strike and Fade? How do I understand, prioritization of like, look, this list is really built around the Lancers, the Spite Rider Lancers. So I've got to prioritize that. If I don't kill them, they come back, whatever, right? It's all about information sharing. So I'm sure you're going to tell me more as we go through it. Laurie has sent me a bunch of lists too, so we're going to see how he's thinking about Sylvaneth. But also, I want to get your perspective on the rules and go through, what are you liking? What are you not liking? And remember that we are in 2022 General's Handbook Season 1. It's all about Galatian veterans. It's about the GVs and actually I think kind of works quite well with you with the Bonds of Battle, having to be able to fight in 2 ranks. It kind of gave Kurnoth hunters with swords a massive glow up.
They're 5 wounds, so it doesn't, unfortunately.
Oh, I always forget that.
It helps. It helps with if you take Dreadwood and you take Spite Revenants, it helps them. But apart from that, if we are talking about the current GH, then Galatian Vets has been great because Tree Revenants are the best Galatian Vets, or one of the best Galatian Vets units out there. Their ability to go anywhere on the board is massive. So I think we are good in this GH. Sword Hunters unfortunately are just 1 wound too many to get that glow up.
I was thinking, like, I always confuse Kurnoth Hunters with 4 or 5 wounds. I always go with the 4, not the 5, but oh well.
Yeah.
Thoughts and prayers. But overall, you think they work quite well with the battle pack, the GV stuff, the bounty hunter?
Yeah, I think so. I think Tree Revenants are just so good at that side of the GH that if you're picking, or your opponent is picking one to be proving ground, then Tree Revenants can always go there basically. Alongside that, if you're looking for a bounty hunter unit, then you've got loads of options who actually really noticeably get better. Like Kurnoth Hunters with scythes put into bounty hunters just jump up a level. Some of the best benefits from it are the cavalry, Revenant Seekers and Spite Rider Lancers. Both just jump up so much in terms of damage if you do put them into bounty hunters. And obviously, we've kind of got this mini game going on in this season between like how much Galatian Vets do you take and stuff like that. But I think Sylvaneth are in that position where if they like my main list, which we'll talk about in a second, is 3 drops because it's got 1 or 2 units of bounty hunters in it, and then it's got some Tree Revenants. So I'm playing that game where if I'm coming up against something which is very Galatian Vet heavy, I've got the increased damage output I need for it. But at the same time, if I'm not, I've got in this list, I think I've got 3 units of Tree Revenants, which means that I'm not giving them away to my opponent to just kill easily. But if I find myself in a position where I need to contest something's proving ground, I need to use those abilities, then I can do that. So I think they're in a really good position in this GH. Yeah.
Spoiler, we're not going to be talking about it in a second. I think it'll be a good 30 minutes before we get to your lists. Just to like, people are like, where's he going to talk to this list? No, we've got rules to go through because I want your perspective on, there's a whole bunch of rules and especially new rules. And I think part of the new rules is really kind of, especially like, is it from the Woodland Depths? I think it is. Some of the new, Places of Power. Places of Power has really breathed new life into Sylvaneth. Because I think that's probably one of the challenges in the past. There has been smaller table sizes. it's been harder to get the wildwoods on the table. Now that you can activate a bunch of terrain, make them overgrown, and then actually get them to do things in your faction, as opposed to just, was it like a bravery buff, or what did I can't remember what it used to do, but now
it
it's
used to
actually useful.
Yeah, it used to give you inspiring presence effectively from like all immune to battle shock and a little bubble, which was good, which was handy. But you're right, it was a tiny buff rather than a big one. And what I'd say is that it used to be always this big problem you have, this big conversation you have to have at the beginning of the game about terrain placement, and you kind of be looking like, right, well, if we put the terrain like this, and I'm getting 2, maybe 3 woods on the board, and that seems a fair compromise between us, and it was always a bit awkward, like what how reliant you were on that, and that does remain still. But you're right, it's now the case that actually, if you have a normal looking board, then you're going to be able to take advantage of the terrain and teleport from one piece of terrain to another. And that's I think I remember when I was playtesting this, I thought it, and I think it's a really nice fix to how Sylvaneth feel they should play without completely and utterly putting the emphasis on you that you've got to make sure terrain is placed in exactly the right position. There is still the element of that, and that maybe later on is a time to dwell on it more when we're talking about counters. But obviously there are pretty clear wording on what terrain you can pick for places of power. And so if your opponent wins that roll off and chooses where to put terrain, they can be quite clever with that and restrict what you're picking as your places of power. So there is still an element of a terrain minigame, which I'm not particularly a fan of. I don't like that that's something which determines how your chances are in the game. But as I say, maybe we'll talk about that later. But for the most part, like I think the idea of places of power is a really good one, because it means that your army relies on teleporting. Like that's why they're expensive. That's the points for that are built into your points. And now the terrain element of it allows you to do that basically.
And just to call out Chris Clark's comment down below, I think if you're listening to this as a opponent to Sylvaneth, you need to understand the importance of terrain and the wildwoods and anything that's tagged as overgrown, so that you could start to mitigate or even anticipate where they might strike and fade, where they might be, walking through the spirit paths. Because I think that's probably, Sylvaneth is very much about guerrilla warfare. You are not an honest fight. You're not Iron Jaws. You don't walk up the table and, charge on flanks. It's not what you do. You are very much get in, pick the points that you want to fight, spread us out as much as possible, hit as hard as you possibly can, and take as little damage as possible, and get out as soon as possible. You're very much a high movement game, almost like, as I said, it reminds me a lot of Carriage and Overlord, just in a very different way.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like I've played a couple of mirrors now, since Sylvaneth versus Sylvaneth, and the first thing I'm looking to do in my first turn is to get within 3 inches of as many of those overgrown pieces of wildwoods as I can, and just to shut that down, basically. Sorry, I'm giving away trade secrets here, really, aren't I? But that's what, if you are playing the mirror, or if you're playing against Sylvaneth, then you just got to get within 3 inches of those wildwoods, those overgrown pieces of terrain, and then you're immediately limiting options. Like obviously they can cast new wildwoods, and maybe they've got an ancient, so they can summon a new wildwood up as well. But if you're just getting within 3 inches, then you can really shut down where they're going. And yeah, so that's what I think you need to be looking at. If you're looking at your list, you're looking right, how do I beat Sylvaneth? Something which perhaps isn't immediately obvious is like, right, what units have I got which I can push up the board quickly, get within 3 inches of these terrain pieces, and I don't mind them being up there. Like obviously you don't want to do that with your Maw Crusher, because then you're leaving your Maw Crusher out in the open. But maybe you've got a unit of 5 Ard Boys which you're like, right, they're gonna deploy them on the line. My first turn, they're gonna run up and they're gonna just get within 3 inches of that piece of terrain, maybe 3 inches of another piece of terrain as well if I can stretch them out enough. And there you go, I've shut down 2 of their teleports.
It's always been one of the key strategies. Again, I'll never forget when I played Liam. I used to play Liam a lot. We'd always play like on a Thursday night. One of the first things I would do is I'd go low drops so I could choose who goes first. Yeah, you put down the faction terrain at the start, but I would find one unit and apply a run roll of 6 so I can move up the board as quickly as possible, take up as much space as possible so you could summon another wildwood, and start denying where you teleport. And at least now you've got a whole bunch of options. And I think that's kind of critical and key on how you get the most out of your movement. Couple of rapid fire questions I want to ask you before we get into the rules and maybe get into your perspective. First off, is there any units that you think have gotten a big glow up? Units that you didn't quite use in the last book, and now you're looking at them either because the war scroll changed, because of the current general's handbook or the points, or something that's just become good?
I think basically the whole book that can apply to, which is a really nice position to be in, is that like so much in the book has got a glow up. I do think like one's worth noting. Worth noting. Alariel straight away. Alariel being coming back to life just really makes it difficult to play against. One of the mirrors I've played was against your friend Dave, and he beat me, much to my chagrin. And playing against Alariel for the first time first time playing against the new version of Alariel, and it's horrible because she's got a 2d6 heal, 2d6 heal every of your hero phases, and now she comes back to life, which means that when you're on the other side of the table, and she's movement 16, she's got a 6 damage spear, a spell which when it goes off is brilliant. She can do 20 damage from combat. She can also kill something as well. It's so hard being on the other side of that. I think when you play with Alariel, you can't help but see how she might whiff downwards, and you can't help be like, oh god, but she could miss with her spear. Her spell could fail to cast. She could roll 2 ones to hit. Just whenever you're taking Alariel, whenever you think about taking Alariel, think about it from the other person's perspective. You've got this 16 wound, 3-up save, 2d6 healing beast that when it does die, it comes back to life.
What you up?
And so it depends on the turn. So and it's worth noting that when she dies, you don't have to roll next hero phase. You can choose. So whenever she dies, if you lose her first turn, let's say, well done, that's impressive. I mean, I've done it many times myself, so I can't laugh. But if you lose her first turn, if you choose to bring her back first turn, then it's a 5-up. Turn 2 is a 4-up, turn 3 is a 3-up, turn 4 is a 2-up, and then turn 5 you actually get it back automatically because it's the turn you're on plus to the dice roll. And so you see that's it does make it quite hard to use her, because I think normally you're going to want to bring her back turn 4, maybe turn 3 if you're really struggling. And so from your perspective, you're always worried about rolling that 1 or 2, but that's not how it looks from your opponent's perspective. And it is, again, as I say, against Dave, I overcommitted to killing her. It took me 2, maybe even 3 turns to do it, and because she was constantly healing, it really, if you don't kill her in 1 turn, or double her, then she just goes straight back up, and she can retreat and charge as well, so you can't even really pin her in. And then I did eventually kill her, and then Dave rolled the 2-up, his turn 4, got her back, and she comes back at the end of your hero phase on 8 wounds. So all right, she's not that fully healed, but it's still movement 15, still just goes wherever she wants basically. So she's brilliant. She's 840 points, which I know is a lot, but she's still got that free summon, so effectively she's 590, and she is still that beautiful jack of all trades basically, where you never quite know what you're going to get from her from your perspective, but psychologically for your opponent, and when she does, something will go off for her basically, I think. So I think she's still brilliant.
And so, and like the summon piece, just to call it just the summon really quickly, the versatility at a tournament to be able to go, right, I want Kurnoth hunters with bows because I need more shooting. I need more bodies, so I'm going to summon, dryads, or I need a tree lord, or, the versatility in this is incredible. So I just want to call that out because it's under leveraged. Well, not under leveraged, but it's underspoken about, like, yeah, I can chuck on a free unit. But it's the versatility. And by the way, speaking of Dave, I got some dice for you. I've got some AOS coach dice for you.
I appreciate that. They just roll 6s. From my experience of playing against them, they literally just roll 6s. I'm getting very salty there. That might say more about me than anything else. I think with that summon as well, there is 2 sides to the summon. I think now that we can only teleport 1 unit a turn, I think the fact that she can move up the board, she moves and then summons. So actually that's really helpful, because you can, and Kurnoth hunters move at 5, so they're slow. So you move her 16 and then you summon those Kurnoth hunters into cover or onto an objective or wherever you want. That used to be a bit like meh, because you would teleport so much anyway. Now that we've actually got less teleports, her being able to move and then summon is good. The only kicker to that is that, of course, because they're summoned, they're not in any battalions. So quite often you'd want those dryads in expert conquerors, or you'd want those kind of hunters and bounty hunters, and you can't do that. So it's not without its negatives, but I do think it probably has got better than it used to be on balance.
Yeah, she's a great model, and that's probably one thing that you and I were talking before we went live is the current Age of Sigmar books, and I'll get to those other rapid fire questions in a second, is that in their last book, it was kind of very clear that there was one or two of the groves that were the good groves. There was one or particular build that was the good build. I feel like when I look through the Sylvaneth book, most units are viable, most allegiances are viable, most options are viable. Now some will be better, some will be worse depending on the meta and your opponent, but I don't feel like there's much trash in the book.
No, not at all. Not at all. I now have reached the point where I have either written or have seen written a list with every single unit in the book. I think there's maybe 2 groves which aren't a goer, but that's it. Everything else is really viable. On the what other ones have got glow ups as well. I do think Kernel Hunters have got slightly better. Them having a 3-up save built into their war scroll is brilliant, and the damage has become a little bit more consistent across the board. They are more expensive, but also you can make them battle line in Heartwood, and so they've got more options to them. They haven't gone massively better. Like they still basically Kernel Hunters still do now what they always used to do. But Kernel Hunters' big weakness was multiples, but it was also shooting, because their re-rolls of save was only in the combat phase, and so you'd be on a 4-up save against shooting. Now that they're a 3-up save across the board, I think that really helps them, and particularly because you're so often going to be in cover with them. They're really hard to get through. So Kernel Hunters, I also do think Dirthu's got better too.
You beat me to the punch. That was gonna be mine. I was gonna say thanks, Laurie. No. Please go. You go on. You share, and then if you miss something that I like, I'll add it.
I think he's a lot of points. He's 370 points, but he's got so much utility to him now, and he always had utility to him. But he's just a few things have just been nudged in his favour. So he's still he's top bracket, I think, until 6 wounds now. When it used to be 3 wounds, he'd go down to D6, which is obviously a real issue. His shooting attack is still really solid. But he now has 14 wounds rather than 12 wounds, which again just makes that little bit of difference to him being good. His strike last is now a monstrous rampage rather than just something that's war scroll, which I know is divided opinion. But the fact that it's on a 3-up, not a 4-up, I think just makes it slightly more reliable for me, which I really like. And so I think, and the fact that Greenwist Gladius is still out there, which gives you D3 extra attacks on his big sword. He's got a secondary attack now, which is better. And I think again, like if you compare him to Kernel Hunters at first glance, you're like, right, well, just Kernel Hunters a better bang for my buck. But when you're looking at everything else he brings in terms of monstrous rampages, in terms of his shooting, in terms of his secondary attack, in terms of even just being able to stomp or roar something, he is expensive, but he really does give you a lot of options. He will still, that time when you need to kill something, roll 3 ones to hit and then 3 ones to wound, and then they roll a 6 for their final save. So he will still infuriate, and perhaps in that respect he's not the competitive choice, but he is still, if you want to just blow something up with your one model, just put it in and go, right, yeah, that's 36 damage, see you later. He's still beautiful for that.
He's still derp through sometimes. Couple of other quick units that you've added, and then Chris Clark, I will go to your question. It's a good one actually about the Warsong Revenant that I'd love to kind of revisit, because that is a new unit as well. You've got a whole bunch of new units. So first off, high level view, Lady of Vines.
I think she's too expensive. I think she's too expensive, and what she's really good at is too unreliable. So her 5-up ward's amazing. 5-up ward in the Sylvaneth book is so good. Like that's the answer to so many problems you've got. We're weak against mortals, and a 5-up ward solves that. The issue is it's a 7 to cast. So even if you lean massively heavily into that, and you're taking Naru and you're taking burgeoning, and you're going all for that, but then you're losing out on other things. And even then you might roll a 7 to cast it, and then your opponent just rolls an 8 to stop it. You're like, right, well that's it. She also summons up some dryads, but again it's on a 2-up, so that key turn you might just roll a 1. and then you like, oh, that key game rather, you might just roll a 1 because it's once per game, and she might just roll a 1. You're like, right, well that's because you can be like, actually 3-2-5, but actually she's 2-2-5. But then if you roll a 1 on that key game on your table 1 game 5, then actually that's not good. And so yeah, and that's I think Paul Buckler just made that point. I think that's Paul. That actually,
I agree wholeheartedly with his comment. The Lady of Vines is good, but there are better options in the book
because you've got so much stuff.
Heroes.
Yeah, in that, and then I think later on you're going to ask me. Yeah, you've got 300 something characters: Lady of Vines, Warsong Revenant, Dryker, Tree Lord Ancient, Durthu. It's like you put a few of those in, and suddenly you're like, all right, well that's 1,000 points gone. And I just think whenever you put Lady of the Vines in, you're like, well, why would I not just take one of the other ones basically, and they would do the job better.
Yeah, and you also lost, was it the Branch Wraith or the Branch Witch?
Yeah,
one of them.
Poor Smell for Branch Wraith. Got killed. I mean, it's terrible model, but there you
go. Well, it's the old Drycher model. It's the old fine cast Drycher before she got a glow up, and you take that to get the potential 10 dryads every turn. But you're right. Like if I'm taking her once per battle, I could fail that. Like outside of like assuming that I fail it, would I take her for these abilities? No, I'd probably go an Archrev. I'd go some other type of unit, because I think where was it? Josh Craig mentioning, do you think the Lady of Vines plays something that's a little bit different to the rest of the faction? Yeah. And I would tend to agree. Yes, I would say that it's not a synergistic hero.
Because you're bouncing and fading again and again and again, and therefore having that 12-inch 5-up bubble. It's good, but it doesn't. So you're not jumping into a position, tagging people in place, and then grinding. You're hitting and running, and so it doesn't really fit with that. So I mean, I'm still writing lists of her in, like that's still happening, and I think there is still that flex there. But I think if you're writing properly competitive, then unfortunately she gets dropped out too easily.
Yeah, like you're spoiled for choices. You're almost like Stormcast heavy, where you just have so many great hero choices where you just don't have enough points to run all the heroes. No. Like I would love to run a double Warsong Revenant. I'd love to then have Durthu. I'd love to have X and Y, and then all of a sudden I have no points.
Yeah, exactly.
What about Gossamer Archers? So you got them in the box. People thought they were OP. People were like, they're busted. If you charge them, Unleash Hell is going to kill the whole world. Now, most people seem to have dropped them for whatever reason. Where do you stand with Gossamids?
I think that they have a role in teams is what I think I've ultimately come to the decision on. I think if you're writing a balanced list that you want to go 5-0 at a tournament, then they're just too pricey. I think 5 doesn't do enough work, and so therefore you need to take either 2 5s or in my opinion, a 10. And then that's 440 points that you're spending on them. And in an army where you don't have many options, you don't have a lot of points to play with, that's just too much spent on a unit which is ultimately just 20 wounds and a 5-up save. And you come up against Storm Fiends, and Storm Fiends will just go, right, well, they're dead. Just like that. Or Iron Drakes or whatever. Like there's in singles, there's too much counter to it. But in teams, they're undoubtedly a good counter to a lot of armies. But same as Lady of Vines, you do have that chance of rolling a 1. I played against, I believe it was Dan in this mirror I played, and he rolled a 1 first turn. I put my Revenant Cavalry up the board, Revenant Seekers up the board, charged some Tree Revenants and the Gossamer Archers, thinking, right, well, I'll just kill the Tree Revenants. He rolled the 1, so I just went into them and killed all by 1 first turn. I do something which has maybe come around a little bit to them. Their spike ability on their shooting has got real potential, and so I have written some singles lists with them in, because
is it D3 models? Is that
yeah? So on a 6, they've got 2 attacks each, and on a 6 they do D3 mortals, which is effectively what you're looking for. And like I was having a play with them because I want to see what they were like as a unit against Phil Marshall, and shooting against a Varangard unit, and did 17 mortal wounds from 9 Gossamids, which obviously is massively swingy, but like mad. Like if it goes, it goes. And so maybe they've got a role there. Like I think before I saw them as they've got one role, and that role is not reliable enough, i.e. there is a screen which jumps backwards. But now I kind of go, well actually, if against some armies I'm kind of Maybe with Warsinger, I'm going, right, that's a 27-inch threat range because they get +3 of their movement. You've got your Cruciator, or you've got your you've got your key model that I can just put them and go, yeah, I've spiked. Good game. That's that key thing taken off basically. So I still think they're too pricey. I think I'd like them slightly cheaper, but I'm not as down on them as I was initially.
I'm glad you mentioned the Cruciator, because that was what I was thinking is if you're playing, because Nighthaunt's certainly risen up to power as well, and a lot of that power comes from the Cruciator combining with the Spirit Host who bodyguard for the Cruciator, who are then doing Scarlet Doom with the Bladegeist, and being able to shut that down for Kurnoth is very, very difficult, and you have a lot of rend-based attacks, so having some ability to reach out and touch them and pull down that Cruciator might be the key to success for Nighthaunt. But I think you're right. I think my initial take was that they are a little bit too pricey, especially for how frail they are. They are a glass cannon, super frail, and if your opponent has some range damage, they can take them out before you get the value out.
Yeah, and easily too, very easily.
Quick question from Face and Bases is talking, and I saw this a lot in the old book where it was almost like forcing you to buy 3, 4, even 5 sets of Wildwoods. And I thought that was a big tax for Sylvaneth players. And they're not easy to transport. They're all spindly, and like it was a crap experience. Have you found that is the case with Sylvaneth? Like, are you taking multiple Wildwoods?
Yeah, I think it's still there, unfortunately. You don't need as much as you did before because you've got these overgrown terrain pieces which do balance some of that out. I think your first deployment of a wood will always be 3 pieces, so you're always going to need 3 there. And then through the game, you're probably deploying 2, 3 more. So you definitely don't need as much as you did before. The issue remains that if you're a properly competitive player, there's that one piece of the Wildwood which is really small compared to the other 2 pieces. And so I want 3 of those basically to be able to put where I can, and so therefore I'm happy that I've got a few boxes I've bought. But yeah, you realistically you don't need more than 3 boxes of woods. But it depends how much of a tryhard you are. So it's still a pain. Like it is still like when I had my sabbatical, I was running Archaon and Friends, and it was just 1 box. I had in this filing cabinet basically box, which I just take with me to events, and that was it. And now I'm like, right, well, I've got my army, I've got my Wildwoods, I've got so much more with me. I say it's not as bad as it once was, but it is still part of the nature. Like, and if you are someone, for example, who gets the train everywhere and often or plane or whatever to your tournaments, like I'm sure some of your viewers overseas do, maybe it's not the right army because they are bad, unfortunately.
It is what it is. Like you take as many woods, and Warhammer Games Club mentioning that 9 pieces of woods is probably all you need. So you're probably right. Obviously, more competitive players will get more woods to get more options on the base sizes and kind of get the trees on the table where you need them to. But it's up to you. No different to like the summoning pool. Do I need to go out buy all Alariel summoning immediately? No, restrict yourself, but don't put the pressure on. A couple of other burning questions, because I said that they'd be rapid fire, and this has not been rapid fire. But I've appreciated your insight, so like that's on me. You got your bugs. So you got 2 versions of the bugs. You've got the Spite Rider Lancers and the Revenant Seekers. Thoughts? Like them? Don't like them? If I'm going to buy a box, which one am I going to build first?
So again, like my opinions have changed on these. And Revenant Cav to begin with, I thought they weren't great. 4s to hit hurts basically on the Revenant Cavalry, the Revenant Seekers. But now my list of choice and what I think is the best list in the game is 9 of them. So 9 Revenant Seekers in 1 unit. I know other people have been running 2/6 for a similar kind of role. 9 Revenant Seekers are just so hard to deal with. So 9 Revenant Seekers, they rally on a 5-up, and they've got an ability which on a 2-up they return a model to any unit which is 5 wounds or less within 12, which includes themselves. And then you've got a spell which can bring 1 back. And so in the past, I've been down on 3, and then I'll rally 3, bring back 1 from a spell, and bring back 1 from something else, from their own ability as well. And it's only on 8. and this unit of 9 is 45 wounds, moving 12. Like it's really hard to deal with. The games I've lost is when I've lost them. One game I've lost is when I lost them really early on, and so that is their weakness. But I think Revenant Cavalry are really good as a anvil unit, which also does deal damage. I think we spoke earlier on as well, and this is relevant for both of them. I think Spike Rider Lancers, I think their damage is just slightly too low. I think what they gain, i.e. 2 inches of movement and always strike first, you don't really care about. Like always strike first, you tend to be hitting with one unit and then going away. So the fact that they always strike first, I think it is just on the charge, is kind of irrelevant. You don't, that's not giving you what you need from them, basically. With as we mentioned earlier, good players will block off your wildwoods to stop you from teleporting to them. That doesn't block off fading away though, so you can still strike and fade away to your home wildwood. And so that's why I think cavalry are very good, because actually I think if you're playing, the more you play with a book and then play against good players, you're like, all right, I've got six scythes, or I've got Dirthu. And actually a good player will just stop you getting anywhere with them. But the bugs can go up the board, and they can hit something and then strike and fade, and you can position in the right place. But like, right, if I get the next turn, I'm 16 away, so that's a 4-inch charge. But if they get the turn, their movement 6, I'm 10 inches away from their charge, and miles away. So you can play. It gives you something which I think, as I say, good players will start countering other ways to play. So they give you that. So I think they are very, very much needed and are a very good book. For me, it's Revs over Spites, Rev Cav over Spike Cav. Spike Cavs are a little bit annoying. Not annoying. It's a little bit of a shame because Spike Cav I thought could be brilliant if we entered a Galatian vet world, because Spikes in Bounty Hunters are bonkers because they've got more attacks. They're all 1 damage each. So like if you run them through damage calculators, then their damage just goes off the charts basically. But we're not in a Galatian vets world, are we? There's you all like if you look at the top list at Carnage, the big Tudor in the UK at the moment, then so many lists at the top just basically have got none or very few, and so there's that's why I think Spikes are just not quite there. But as I say, Revenant Cabinet, if you are a Sylvaneth player and you proxy it or whatever, try the 9 out. It's such a nice feeling that first time where you put them somewhere, you take the hit, you lose 6, and then you roll your rally. I lost 4 the other week. I rolled my rally, rolled 4 5 ups. So I was like, all right, well that's the whole unit back then, just like that. That's yeah, you've committed to doing 20 wounds to me, and I've just got all of the back next turn. And like basically, if they're not dead, then they'll be fully healed by the end of the game, which is very good. And that's also part of it as well, that by the end of the game, as you playing this trading back and forth, that they just get stronger and stronger because they are going to be full strength. And like when you get to turn 4, you've got this unit of 9 cav which are moving 12, and your opponent's lost a lot of their army. They're just getting better and better. I love them.
And that's not even acknowledging Harvest Boon that can give them the pre-game move of 12
Yeah.
inches. There's so much more list tech that we're going to touch in a second, because I'm literally about to change this change the screen. But I'm going to throw a bone to one of our listeners asking, do you have any ally recommendations for Sylvaneth? Do you tap into the ally pool at all? And if so, what would you tap into?
So the one which everyone has jumped on quite rightly, I think I saw Jonathan earlier on mentioning it, is the Battle Mage. So Battle Mage from Gur. So this is a bit of a weird rule.
Cities of Sigmar?
Yeah, Cities of Sigmar, Battle Mage. Take the Gur one. So apparently we're playing in Gur at the moment. Those narrative of you amongst that would be aware of that, but apparently there's GHs in Gur, who knew, which means that the Battle Mage gets +1 to cast. Great straight away. And the spell for the Battle Mage from Gur is +2 to charge and run as well, which is again great for Sylvaneth. And it is only 100 points. So if you're looking like our Branch Witch is 130 points, so this is actually a cheaper spellcaster than the Branch Witch, arguably with a better spell than the Branch Witch a lot of the time, and has an 8 +1 to cast. So Battle Mage is brilliant. Other allies, I think you're often looking for screens. I think that we haven't seen people taking them yet, but I think actually just some Cities of Sigmar chaff again is good, or Aether Wings, that kind of thing you're still looking for. But I think I've seen a couple of people taking Drake Spawn Knights, for example, as a 3-up save. cavalry unit that you can just string out in front of your board and can move up there. So there is some play there. You having units that don't rely on wildwoods has got the potential there. I have run a couple of lists with 2 sharks because their damage is really good from shooting. It's similar profile to bow hunters, really. I think I'm slightly better than bow hunters for points. The issue I found with sharks, which I think is reflective of a lot of the allies you might think about taking, is that they can't use wildwoods. They can't do that teleport, and you might not want it a lot of the time, but the way I'm playing with the army is that it's kind of this moving around all over the place. And sharks, despite being moving 14, don't quite play that in the same way. And I think you do find yourself missing that. If you're taking a unit that you actually want to do work with, you'll suddenly be like, right, well, actually, I kind of wish they were on the other side of the board, or I wish I could just charge here and then fade out there. And allies, obviously, you can't do that with. So I think Battle Mage is good. I'm sure there's other options there for small support or for chaff. But I tried the prime for a little bit. I was just like, this just doesn't work, basically. Oh, there you go. Yeah. It's prime time.
I was going to bring that up because one of the units that I've absolutely loved in Stormcast lately is the Chariot. You know, it's 12 wounds, 160 odd points, 3 up armor save, mortals on the charge like a Stonehorn. You might not need it. And I was going to segue exactly into, is prime time still a thing? I'm seeing prime pop up a lot in Seraphon. What's your take on prime? And then we're going to the rules. We are going to the rules. It's taking us 50 minutes, but we're getting into the rules, Laurie.
I think with the prime, it should work. As I said, I included him in the list I took to the one day a while ago because he should work, right? Like, he teleports off the board. He's therefore got great movement. He gives you something as an option. The mortals helps with all the mortals you can do via the Warsong and things like that. The issue I found is that you're elite army and you need things to be able to pull their weight. And I was basically just 325 points for just the D3 mortals was what I was really relying on and really using. I wasn't using anything else from him enough. And he's still he's like Dirty. He's got 3, 5, or 7 attacks, which are 3s and 2s. He's going to roll 1s when you need him to not roll 1s. And in fact, he's only 3 damage, so even more than Dirty. Like, you get 2 through. I was like, all right, well, that's 6 damage. Great. That's not enough. So I thought he really should fit, but from playing with him, I'm not sure he does, actually.
I just want to call out this comment and then we'll segue. I think Aether Wings are a good choice of screens. I agree with you, by the way, Inquisitor. You mentioned the Battle Mage ready for the charge, and because it's a spell, you can cast it. If you fail it, then you can kind of hold back your strike and fade if you're trying to be aggressive. The Rune Lord for the +2 to unbinds is very nice, especially if you use a heroic action, then you can do 2 of them. To unbinds at +2, which is awesome. And something that I've been recently including in my list is the Knight Incantor for the once per game auto unbind. So if you don't want to risk it and you're finding people just purple sunning you or using the boatman Lachlan, the Soul Seeker, and is bridging up, I don't know, Thankwall on +5, which is what I experienced the other day, you can just go no. So you don't chance it.
I agree with that. I find myself, this says more about me than anything else. I'm averse to taking stuff that I won't use in most of my games. And that's the thing with Rune Lord and with the Incantor in particular. I just like, right, that's true, but then I might play against something which I don't care about the auto unbind. I might play against Nighthorn or Nurgle, where I'm like, right, well, the auto unbind is helpful here, but it's that's all I'm taking this Incantor for. It seems a waste.
Yeah. By the way, Nighthorn's taking Purple Sun because there's literally no impact back to them because I don't care about the Ren, right? But I get what you're saying. It's more about.
But don't they auto cast that?
Well, I mean, if they got Reichner, they essentially auto cast it. So
they've got an artifact. I think they've got an artifact which lets them auto cast it.
Yeah.
So
that's where the +2 Rune Lord might come in.
Yeah, to get rid of it later on. I'll do that. Yeah.
All right, I'm bringing up the rules. All right, so we've got a bunch of rules. I'm going to talk about groves in a minute. Well, I've actually got the groves on screen, so I'll get your perspective on the groves. But very much, you've got a whole bunch of rules. You've got places of power, which is about essentially picking 3 pieces of terrain that are on the battlefield that are wholly outside enemy territory, and you tag them. And when you tag them, they are in your hero phase. You can heal 1 wound for each friendly Sylvaneth unit that's wholly within 9 inches of this overgrown terrain. Like it, build around it. Any thoughts you want to add on? Yes, Lex, I think it's the Midnight Tome. Thank you for that. we've already talked a lot about places of power and how those 3 pieces of terrain support you, and it means you don't need to take as many wyldwoods, and you've got other access points. Is there anything you'd want to add to places of power? I feel like we've already talked about this a lot.
I think, yeah, I agree. I think we've basically covered. I would just say that the healing 1 wound is, whilst not a lot, it's nothing to sniff at. I think I think damned is really helpful for the book as a whole. I think that you stuff like hunters with the Arch Revenant or with the Revenant cavalry as well. Like if you can find damned, then it's good to take it, and this helps with that as well. Like this healing 1 wound is good on top of everything else. So do try to remember that. I think I forget about it a lot, but I think trying to remember and having tokens from Pro Painted or wherever you get your tokens from, then having some tokens which really clearly signpost to you, that's my place of power, then I think that is worth doing.
Really good comments by your friends, Warhammer Games Club, saying the healing is great for Nurgle. So you could remove the disease token off. That's a really good call. Really good call. In addition to the healing, right?
Yeah.
You got a couple of extra rules. You've got the walk the hidden path, so you've always been able to teleport essentially from one wood to another. As you mentioned, you can only do it once per turn, right? So you can't do multiple teleports throughout it's every turn.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to that? I mean, it's pretty stock standard. You can teleport from wyldwoods or overgrown terrain.
Yeah, the thing, as you say, we've kind of covered this a lot in getting to this point, basically, and the options from it, and how you counter it. What I would mention is that I think it's really tempting to think that a lot of the time, and you will be doing a lot of the time, walking the hidden paths with the same unit that you strike and fade with. So the classic will be, you teleport a unit, you charge, you teleport out. In the end game, and in terms of the scenario, I think it's worth noting that you can use that as effectively as 2 separate teleports to the same place. So let's say you're playing Realmstone Cache, and it's turn 3, and the middle objective is split into 2 different places. You might teleport out with your dryads or with your ancient or whatever. Like one maybe not ancient because they can teleport on top of others, but your dryads or your Warsong or whatever is teleporting using walking the hidden paths. But then what you're doing with your second unit, your 6 Kernoths or your Revenant Cav or whatever, is you're charging and then you're striking and fading to the same place. So I think something which is missed with this is that you have actually got 2 teleports there. And to think that those teleports don't have to be used from an offensive point of view, they can be used from a movement point of view to get you where you need to be. And it might be that you actually, you charge in with your 10 dryads, or you charge in with something which is going to do no damage, like your Lady of Vines. Maybe you charge in with her knowing that you're not going to hurt them, but you need them to be on the other side of the board, and actually you've teleported one thing already, so this is the way you're teleporting your other thing, is by charging them to get that strike and fade away. Apart from that, I think we've spoken about it. Incredible ability, really just so nice to play with. Like once you get used to playing with it, as I mentioned earlier on, it's quite hard to get used to not playing with it because it gives you so much flex.
Yeah, the fact that you can do it with overgrown terrain is just add another dimension to Sylvaneth. But instead of going through strike and fade, which is basically after the once per turn in your combat phase, immediately after a Sylvaneth unit wholly within 9 inches of the overgrown or awakened wildwood is fought, you can essentially teleport it out, and there's some rules, and you can read the screen, folks. But first off, it's great to avoid some things like, I think there was a lot of discussion about, is it the Xanthar Kai, snakes fighting on death? This, correct me if I'm wrong, you still fade away in your turn before the snakes do their thing?
I don't know.
I thought that was rule. I thought,
but possibly.
Right.
I hate rules, minutiae argument. I've seen Nico in the Sylvaneth chat has explained in detail that apparently we do. I think if I'm playing it, I'll have a chat with my opponent and decide between us how we think it should currently work, because I don't think there's been an FAQ on it. I might be wrong, but I don't think there's been an FAQ on it.
I thought it was clarified, but if it hasn't been clarified, definitely talk to your TO, because the ability to fight and then disappear in your turn only. So you need to really think about if you get double turned, you're not going to be able to strike and fade in your opponent's turn. So whatever you put out, a very good chance it's going to die. So you've got to be defensive as much as offensive in your thinking.
100%, yeah.
The question I wanted to lead though with strike and fade is, when you're thinking about this from a list design point of view, what are the types of units that you like to consider as strike and fade? Obviously, every unit at any time can do it, but is there a particular archetype or a thing that maybe might work better with strike and fade?
Like, obviously, you want it to be a punchy unit, don't you? Basically, you want something which is going to hit and then get out there as quick as possible. So you're looking at 6 Kurnoths. You're looking at maybe 9 Kurnoths if you want to be that big. You're looking at Revenant Cavalry. You're looking at Durthu, even looking at Alariel as well. Like, you're looking at your unit which you don't want to just leave hanging around, but you want to get in and get out, and having hit something and then gone out there. So yeah, it's quite straightforward stuff there. I do think that as you play with a book, as you develop the way you play, you'll realize that actually stuff like Durthu is great, but has got limitations to his ability to fade, because he's much easier to block off. Whilst I do think actually Alariel was brilliant for strike and fade, because she's got that 16-inch move. She can get where she wants to get to hit and retreat in a way that the 6 Kurnoths or Durthu are going to struggle with more.
So you'll use strike and fade, for example, with Alariel. You won't use her to like walk the hidden paths and then kind of strike and fade. You will be thinking about her high movement, get her in position, especially with that large base, and trying to keep it outside of 9 from your enemy.
Yeah.
And then use the strike and fade because you're already within, as long as you're wholly within that overgrown or awakened wildwood. I like that. It's a good way of looking at it as 2 different rules. I think some people look at it as like one bundled jumble. Like, I teleport with the wildwoods and then I teleport away, and there's 2 different rules.
And then if you're using strike and fade with Alariel or with Revenant Cavalry or whatever, and you're moving to get there, then it means that you can use walk the hidden paths for the scenario, for movement basis. Like, you can use that to, maybe you've put your Warsong in one position and you now need, and they're going to come for your Warsong. Maybe your opponent's got quite near to your Warsong. Like, right, well, my Warsong's now just going to teleport to the other side of the board because I want her out of danger. Or you do the same with your Arch Revenant, or you do it with your bows because you want a better angle on them. And that's the thing. If you're going, I've got a unit, it's walking, it's fading, then you're really cutting down your options. If you're going, my strike and fade unit is getting there via their movement, then it gives you so much more options with the teleport itself.
Yeah, it's a great ability as well. If you realize, let's say, for example, those 9 Kurnoth hunters or those nine Revenant Seekers or whatever it might be, that war of attrition is getting to your unit and you need to rally them ASAP. You can strike and fade, get them out of combat, which is always one of the biggest restrictions is, you can't rally in combat. Boom, I'm out of combat, I've strike and fade. Now in the next turn, regardless of who wins priority, I can always do rally at the start of the hero phase. So
it's also just quite nice when, like, let's say you've got 3 or 4 of the cav left and you're in combat with something which you know is going to kill them. You still, but you'd really like to do that bit of damage to them before you go. Like, maybe they've got I don't know, a unit of protectors or something like that, which you're in combat with. You can be like, right, my 4 guys, they're going to fight, they'll kill a few guys, and then they're going to fade out of there. I don't need to teleport them out of there in the movement phase, because I'm going to do it at the end of in the combat phase. And then, as you say, then I'm going to start rallying them next turn. So I think that's a really nice little ability to not have to go, I've got 2 guys, they really need to do some damage here, but I also don't want to leave them there. You can fight, kill, and then get out of there if you've been hit.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is the 4D chess that we were talking about earlier. It's not just about run forward. It's hard enough for some people to remember to retreat, let alone think about strike and fade. You got some other rules. You've got Verdant Blessings. So this is the spell that allows you to summon a wildwood on a casting value of 6. Great. Like, it feels like it's something that you've always had for a long time. Anything you want to add to that?
No, it's still very situational. 18 inches is good, but 3 inches away from everything is quite tough. That's why you might need those small pieces. But yeah, I think it is, as I say, it is what it is, basically.
You make a good point that I wanted to raise, is the fact that the board sizes have gotten smaller this General's Handbook, and there are more objectives. If you think about 12 months ago, we were often fighting over 3 to 5 objectives on average. Now we've got battle plans that have up to 8. So to be able to be outside of 3 and all of these different combinations, and the fact that it's also captured invocations, I don't think that was on the old War Scroll.
I think it's, sorry, just saying annoyingly on ones, I think Prize of Galate is going to come up a lot. And so that's a kind of classic one. It's 1 or 2 in the GH, and so it's a really obvious one. And they, all 5 of those objectives, whilst they activate later on, they are on the board. Whilst they're not activated yet, they are still there. So you can't put it on the, like, it's not like Star Strike in the old days where you could put it where you knew it was going to land. They are actually there, so you've got to avoid them. So that's the thing, you're right, is that there's a lot of scenarios with a lot of objectives, which does, and then you've got terrain, and it does clutter things up. And so yeah, it can be tough to get those down. 18 inches isn't by itself really, doesn't really make that easy.
Which is why I kept saying that I think the overgrown 3 terrain features that are part of your allegiance we just spoke about are more valuable, because even if you find yourself not in a position to use Verdant Blessing, you've still got your original Wildwood, you've still got those 3 places of power that you've chosen at the start of the game, and depending on the battle plan and how things are going, you've also got Verdant Blessing to bring up more trees, and it feels like that you are growing a garden. The one that I really want to get your thoughts around, Laurie, is the Seasons of War. So this is something that's completely brand new to Sylvaneth, and I love it. So when you go to a tournament, you've got to choose this on your list. So it's not like it's something you can choose every battle round. Consider it like a sub-faction. But it's not sub-faction. Just for anyone who's new, it's not tied to your sub-faction. It's just like, think about it as another choice about your army.
Yeah.
Within the Season of War, you get 4 different options. You can be the Burgeoning, you can be the Reaping, you can be the Dwindling, you can be the Everdusk. So it's meant to represent a season of war, and within that season, you get a bunch of rules. Without this being story time with Coach, I'm going to ask you. I'm not going to read them all out. Is there ones that you find yourself going towards more, or ones that really stand out for you, and why?
So I think there's almost 3 levels here. You've got the Reaping and the Dwindling, which are both go-to, and I think are really viable in their own ways. Both are quite straightforward. You get to just either have a reroll from the Dwindling, which is just really nice. Like, that's a really straightforward one, and so that's quite a nice one to just you're always going to make use of that. You've got so many spells in the army. Having that reroll is really good. You can reroll a cast, a dispel, or an unbind. Having that reroll of unbind in the Age of Purple Sun is really helpful as well. So I think Dwindling's got really good game for your archetypal Sylvaneth list. I think Dwindling just helps basically because you're going to be relying on spells. For me, Reaping is the one which I'm increasingly taking. As we've just been discussing, we find ourselves relying on those overgrown terrain pieces more and more because it's hard to get down wildwoods against good players, and the Reaping just feeds into that. Makes it 12 inches rather than 9. 12 inches is big, basically. So if you've got your unit of 9 bugs, which, as I say, I've been running, getting them all within 9 of a piece of terrain or a wildwood is quite tough. But 12 inches really helps with that. So I'd say those 2 are 2 obvious ones to go for. I think below that you've got Reaping, which is a 6. You've got Burgeoning, which is a 6-up ward. More situational. I think it depends on what kind of list you're building. But I think if you're building one which is trying to make itself more capable of taking a punch. So if you are kind of going, right, well, actually, I'm taking 30 Dryads. I'm taking Durthu with Gnarled Warrior, so he's got a 3-up ethereal save. Having that 6-up ward will actually really help with this. I think maybe in the Age of Bounty Hunters, that doesn't quite work because those 30 Dryads are just going to melt. Like I remember building lists of them, and then just because it's the kind of player I am, I did some maths on it. I was like, right, well, if I put in 20 Bladegeist Revenants and Bounty Hunters, they're going to die. Okay, well, it doesn't really matter. Like the tanky units don't really work at the moment. So, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, I would like to see the Burgeoning 6 months from now when we're in a different General's Handbook. Hopefully GVs are gone. There's no Galatian veterans or Galatian veterans. And I could see a real use for like blocks of 20 and 30 Dryads with a 6-up ward, -1 to hit, and I think is it -1 to wound as well. Super tanky on an objective within range of a wildwood, getting that 6-up ward. They're not charging. Absolutely brutal. But right now, you're right. Yeah, you get a 6-up ward, but they're taking double damage against bounty hunters, and there's bounty hunters everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. They'll have their time, but I think they will come around. Everdusk. So for me, Everdusk is at the bottom. I saw Paul just commenting there saying that, like, you know, you can make it work, and you definitely can make it work. I just think that with most lists you build, you really need that 9 inches at least. I've just spoken about how I want 12 inches a lot of the time, and making it 6 inches for a lot of your teleports and stuff like that is really restricting. I think maybe the beauty of this book is that I'm constantly writing lists. There's so much flex and there's so many options. And currently what's going through my head is whether or not I can make Lady of Vines work with Everdusk. She's got a 6-inch bubble around her, which counts as being within a wildwood or overgrown. So she would give out that 6 splitting there, and maybe you can have some kind of, she's got Durthu there, maybe a unit of 6 Kurnoths, and they've all got 6 splitting, and maybe there's something there. But I think the trade 6 splitting, brilliant, really helps you, obviously. But the trade is I think for most lists too big. So that's I'd say. Let's say all 4 are viable. I think you'll see reaping and dwindling the most, burgeoning, and Everdusk slightly less so.
I feel like with Everdusk, you're more likely to, yes, the Lady of Vines getting the buff, absolutely. But I feel like it's rewarding you to go minimum sized unit as opposed to, you know, those 6s and 9 Kurnoth hunters. If you're going to run a whole, I don't know, a Heartwood, and you've got waves of three model Kurnoth hunters, and you know, being within 6 inches is not a challenge. Yeah, sure, great. But when you start going into 6s and 9s and Alariel and even Durthu, these quite large bases, the 3 inches makes a big difference.
Like Alariel's base, for example, is over 6 inches by itself. I think it's 6.5 her base. So, like, for her to be benefiting from that, she has to be on a bit of terrain or on a wildwood to do that, which just, I think, in your head makes you realize how much of a restriction that is.
Yeah, I very much know her base size because as a Living City player, I wish I could teleport with her, but you can't do that. And now that rule changed as well. Everdusk with Kurnoths on objectives, yeah, absolutely. But I think it's just it's a base requirement and a challenge with that. You got your sub factions. There are what, 7 sub factions? Are there ones that stand out for you? I think for me, there's probably 6 that I would use. And Ironbark, it's almost like, why is it even there? But hey, like in 6 months' time, maybe, I don't know, Grumdy is going to upgrade the Dwarden book, and there's going to be some really cool, I don't know, but
yeah, you're right.
What are your thoughts on the sub factions?
I agree entirely. Ironbark is now in its current form not great, but you're right. If we accidentally get a busted dwarf book, then Ironbark might come into play. But the other 6 are brilliant. I think Oakenbrow is more fun. I think if you're going to go that route competitively, then you actually probably want Durthu, Ancients, and Tree Lords in a different build. But the ability to take 3 Tree Lords as battle line is incredibly cool, and the abilities which come with Oakenbrow are cool too. So really good sub-faction, but I do think it's more for fun. The other 5, I think, are all competitively viable in their own ways. I was speaking before about Harvest Boon. I think the ability to make your Revenant Seekers battle line is huge, because then you can take them in the 9, basically. I think that's massive. I really like the pre-game move. I think what you're looking to do as Sylvaneth is you're looking to, when you can, give away first turn. You don't want to get doubled. I know it makes it hard for you to put wildwoods down, but you don't want to get doubled. So as a result of that, the 12-inch move isn't quite as good as it first seems. I'll talk about that in a little bit more when it comes around to the list, which relates to that, because there is some cool tech there. Heartwood is, I think, the most obvious, just straightforward, good build. +1 a hit on 3 units. Brilliant. The fact that it unlocks Kurnoths as battle line on top of that is just a juicy little bonus. But +1 to hit is so good, particularly with the Arch Revenant, which wants to give you +1 attack. But that's a command ability, so you can't do that and all-out attack. So Heartwood kind of counters that really nicely.
And it also counters the. I think Laurie's just dropped off for a second. I'll add him back in a sec. But with Heartwood, hey Laurie, welcome back.
Oh.
You're good. You're good. I was just mentioning with Heartwood, the other thing as well is we're talking about Kurnoth Hunters, is that Kurnoth Hunters with, again, Gledian veterans, you don't have to worry about bounty hunters and things like that because, hey, you don't need to worry about that.
So can you hear me now? Sorry,
I can hear you perfectly. I was just saying.
Sorry, phone died.
It's all good. I told you, like, no, 80%. What does Coach know? He's only been doing this for 4 years. What does he know?
It didn't die. It overheated, so that's slightly more worrying. So Heartwood, as I say, like it's just there's the reason I haven't taken it is because it's too good and I want to be special.
One thing I will say though is that when I look at initially when I looked at Dreadwood, I got really excited till I realized that second unit that can strike and fade had to be Spite Revs, and I'm not really a big Spite Rev fan at the moment. Like I was in the old book where like you could do the Outcast Battalion and get your minimum battle line in a battalion. But I look at Dreadwood and I'm like, I don't want to strike and fade Spite Revs, which means that whole thing is useless to me.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I think on the surface of it, I completely agree with you. But so Mathmello, who I can't believe we've gone this long without mentioning because he's been carrying on doing Sylvaneth through all the hard times and is a real tree lord. He's been on Dreadwood and he does make a very valid point, and that the damage output of Spites is on the same level, or actually is better than Stalkers for Daughters of Cain. So it's basically the same profile. It's one less rend, but aside from that, it's 6s doing mortals to hit. It's 3s. Like they are, for their points, their damage is actually really good. And again, they're very good in bounty hunters as well. They're all 1 damage, 3 attacks each. Like I think I agree with you on Dreadwood. I think the fact that it's once per battle. For both of those, that limits it as well. And I think there's that. You're right. The limitation of it being Spite Revs and it being once per battle probably just makes it a little bit too niche to be properly viable. But like a unit of 15 Spite Revs, like if you get +1 attack from the Arch Rev on them, that is 60 attacks, which is on average 10 mortal wounds. Because their battle line, they can now fight in 2 ranks really easily. So that's actually quite hard to dodge. Like 10 mortal wounds and then into a Galician vet unit is a huge amount of damage on top of that. So they've got a role.
As Inquisitor's also mentioning, the fact that they're on 32 mil bases, if you're double reinforcing them to be a larger unit, while we're in this, not in Fondia, where are we? We're in Galay. While we're in Galay and we've got the bonds of battle, so it means you can essentially fight in 2 ranks. This works really well because their range is only 1 inch. So when you double reinforce them to 15, outside of this battle pack, you only get half the attacks in. So take advantage, I guess, while you can.
To finish off, 100%. To finish off with the final 2, I think Null Root is the most, like if you're picking up the book for the first time, in the same way that I was talking about burgeoning, that reroll cast. Like your army really likes spellcasting. So just take Null Root. Like if you're looking for something straightforward, easy to take, not having to worry about it, Null Root just does that. Null Root gives you 3d6. You're going to use that lots. You're going to use it to cast stuff and to get rid of stuff. So it is a really just straightforward one. Finally, Winterleaf. Winterleaf, I think when I was thinking about this in advance of the book dropping, I thought Winterleaf is the strongest one. Not being able to retreat is massive and is such a good ability, and has been the bane and the reason why people have hated a lot of armies, like Change Host back in the day, the no retreat sub-faction for Zinch, Sylvaneth OG book. Like my favorite thing was a Tree Lord Ancient on 2-up armor save, ignoring Ren 1, re-rolling 1s to his armor save, which you couldn't retreat from. Play Rich Morley a lot. Yeah, and the Cronspine, yeah, exactly. No retreat. People hate no retreat. The issue is that it's not how your army wants to play. As I said, you're hitting, you're retreating, you're striking, you're fading, you're winning on movement. I'm not sure that you want to tag people up, because I'm not sure you normally win that battle. And very much a caveat there. I'm still not sure about that. And I think maybe if you write the right list of Winterleaf, then that might be the most powerful list out there.
because it's such a good ability. But certainly on the surface, it doesn't fit with how the army wants to play.
Again, fast forward 6 months when there's no GVs. If you're pinning down with Dryads, again, with your minuses to hit and wound when you're in range of the Wyldwoods, and you now can't retreat because you've been pinned by one Dryad, yeah, I could see that, being terror. But right now, you carve up battle line, especially things like Dryads and even anything outside of Dryads with bounty hunters. So, yeah, like I wouldn't write these off, but some of them are increased in their value currently. And currently some of the others are like, let's just wait a couple of months and see what changes. Hell, actually, Games Workshop said every 3 months there's going to be a revision to the General's Handbook. So who knows? Maybe bounty hunters will go from +1 to damage to +1 to wound. Who knows? I don't.
Who knows exactly?
Yeah. Laurie might. I don't. You did mention your battle line. Look, I think it's great. If you want to use your Harvest Boon, you can definitely do your Lancers and your Seekers. Kurnoth Hunters for me, especially because they're 5 wounds. That means you can avoid this whole GV type stuff. Your Spite Revs in Dreadwood and your Tree Revs and your Dryads are always battle line. I think for me as well, Tree Revs are so bloody good. They're so good.
And you have missed off Tree Lords as well. Tree Lords can be battling an Oaken, bro.
Yes, I did forget it off. I forgot it off the video, and I've still forgotten it. Yes, Tree Lords are in Oakenbrow.
Yeah. Just one point, because someone said it there, and it's a really good point. Tree Lords have got an ability which, if one of their attacks hits something, then they can't pile in, and that in Winterleaf can be brilliant because you can tag something. It's got a 3-inch range on that attack as well, so you could hit some chaff, pile into Archaon, hit him with your attacks, and all of Archaon's good attacks are 1 inches really. He doesn't kill you, and then he's tagged in combat with you. And then what's great is that you can then next turn you can make him fight last, so then you can just do it again. So there's definitely play there with Winterleaf, but it's maybe not yet. But yeah, as I say, I think what's part of, I think this is one of the best tomes out there, and this is part of it, is that you have got such flex in your battle line options. You don't find yourself going, oh god, I've got attacks, and then when you attack, what your attacks is it's True Revenants, which are probably some of the best battle line in the game because they can teleport anywhere around the board.
I just want to call out one comment from the chat because it's actually a good counter argument to something we've already mentioned, or maybe I mentioned it. Morgan mentioning that Winterleaf is a good counter potentially to Nighthaunt. Yeah. So with Scarlet 100%. Doom, they're doing their mortals on the charge, and Nighthaunt as an allegiance can retreat and charge. So would I take Winterleaf just to combat Nighthaunt? No. But is the ability worthwhile against other factions? Absolutely.
Yeah, I think there's also a point there that, like, when you're Nighthaunt Everio at the moment, and they are a good book. So when you're writing your list, you have to think, right, how am I beating Nighthaunt? I think if you take Winterleaf, you almost don't have to think that because it's such a good counter to Nighthaunt. You can kind of, when you're writing a Winterleaf list, you go, okay, actually, don't have to worry about Nighthaunt. My sub faction gives me such play into them, then I can build a list how I want, really. And that's nice because I'll write a list with like 6 Kurnoth Hunters with scythes. And be like, right, they're going to do a lot of work, and then I'll just go, and then I hit Nighthaunt, and they're damage 1 because of the Cruciator. Their rend is completely useless because of Ethereal, and then that quite often makes me kind of almost bin off a list if I'm kind of going, right, my scythes are going to do all the work for me. But then if you're taking it in Winterleaf, maybe you go, right, well then they might not kill this unit, but they will just tag it in combat and then just grind it out basically whilst I win elsewhere. So I think, I think Winterleaf does have either in teams or it does have flex. But yeah, loads of really good battle line options there. It's great.
Yeah, no, you've got a lot of great options. Do you have any favorite? Let's start with the command traits. Do you have any favorite command traits? Like, if you're going to pick one, what's your favorite from the hero options?
So Spellslinger is bonkers and is possibly one of the few things in the book which could do with a slight change downwards. So Spellslinger, you can, when you cast a spell, you can put it through a wildwood. Not an overgrown terrain feature. You can put it through a wildwood. And that with a Warsong, particularly with a Warsong Revenant with Arcane Tome, can be mad because it's 3 spells cast through a wildwood. So you can put a Warsong right in the corner of the board, outside of Unbind range. And then part of what makes it so good is that you can summon up a wildwood from a wildwood and then cast spells out of that. So your Warsong Revenant, who, if you're a good player, you probably would put cogs next to, certainly what I do, re-rolling all their casts. They go outside of unbind range, summon up a wildwood. From that wildwood, I might do the Warsong's War Scroll spell. So I might do a little bomb from that new wildwood. I might bring back a Revenant Cavalry model, or a kind of hunter, again from the corner of the board, doing all this through my wildwoods. I might do Mystic Shield. I might do whatever. But you're doing all of this just from miles away, which is really strong and can make it very hard to counter. So I think that's very, very powerful spell singing. And is the obvious one to go for. I also really like Warsinger as well. Adding 3 inches to the move is really good ability, particularly on things like Durthu and Kern of Hunters. Them going from 5 to 8 inches move is good. But even on Revenant Cavalry, going from 12 inches to 15 inches really makes a difference. And then if you use it on Alarion, and you go from 16 to 19, she's just that. I mean, 19 is mad. 19 is really impossible to block. And then the other one, which I think is good. Sorry.
No, I was just, oh yeah, keep going. I think you're about to acknowledge the one I was going to acknowledge. Yeah,
and then Gnarled Warrior is great on, and you've got different play there. As I say, I think in Winterleaf on maybe Durthu, I quite like that. I think as long as you can roll 3 ups, then that's really good. There's also an idea which I've had, and I know a few other people have had. Florian in Sylvaneth chat. If you take Gnarled Warrior on a Tree Lord Ancient, so that's a 3-up Ethereal save. There's the spell, which we'll get to in a second, which makes him heal a wound at the end of each phase. So that can make him very tanky as well. And then you'd go in Winterleaf and you can't retreat from that. There's definitely play with Gnarled Warrior as well. I think the other 3, of the other ones, Radiant Spirit, if you really hate Purple Sun, then Radiant Spirit does offer that, but it is a 4-up.
And it's only on your general, right?
No, it's wholly within 12.
It's the bubble of the general.
Yeah. So if you're taking Alariel and you're really worried about her getting Purple Sunned off, then you take Radiant Spirit. I've thought about it a couple of times. Just a 4-up seems too unreliable for me.
Yeah, I think I'd rather go in to get like a Master of Magic and try to unbind it as opposed to ignore it on a 4-up. Speaking of artifacts, we have 6 different options. So you've got the Greenwood Gladius, you've got the Crown of Fell Boas, Seed of Rebirth, Acorn of Ages, Luneth Lamp, and the Vesperal Gem. Do you have any standout options here? And would you take Warlord to get like more of these?
They're all, apart from Luneth's Lamp, I think they've all got play. I think that they're all good but not great, I think is my summary of them. Greenwood Gladius is such an auto for Durthu, which I think is perhaps part of the problem with him, is that if you're taking him, you want Gladius, which means that you're almost starting off with 0 artifacts, because you probably do want another artifact somewhere else. And if you're taking Durthu, you're taking Gladius basically. But it is great on his main attack because, do 3 extra attacks, doesn't have to be near a wildwood or anything like that. So that's great. So that's really good. That's the most obvious one. Alongside that, Vesperal Gem is still really good. What hurts Gem slightly from the old tome is that in the old tome we used to have the Warsong knowing all spells, and now that he doesn't. Then you can only autocast the spell which you've chosen for the Warsong, which means that you've just lacked versatility basically in the same one. A good point by Inquisitors, but I think that's ignoring the fact that you can best day for Durthu, so he can be on +1 to wound anyway, can't he?
What about Acorn of Ages? Like, do you see your use of maybe like taking a turn 1? You set up your initial wildwood, you've got your 3 overgrown terrain features. Would you then get first, take like Acorn of Ages to chuck down another Waked Wildwood, and then double down maybe with Verdant Blessing, or as a fail-safe for Verdant Blessing?
I think 12 inches is too short. I think that there might be a play there. Again, I'm not saying it. I'm not saying it's a bad artifact, because it might be that you do it with a Tree Lord Ancient, and your Tree Lord Ancient has a free one anyway. So you can use that free one to begin with, and then you teleport up the board, and then later on in the game when you need that wildwood down, then you activate the acorn, and that could be really good. As I say, I think the issue is that 12 inches is quite limited, because particularly when you having played a few games of it, where you're setting up, the way you're deploying, you really need more than 12 inches, because you're quite often looking to go over a set of terrain, over an objective, and then squeezing in your wildwood beyond that. And 12 inches doesn't do that. 12 inches quite often normally you're hitting a terrain, an objective. You're hitting an objective, which really limits where you can put it, and then effectively you're adding that new wildwood just really close to where you're starting off. So I think acorn it's not quite good enough. It's a bit of a shame that it's at the start of the hero phase as well, because you could use Lunction the Cell Seeker to teleport up at the board and then drop it, as Paul says. If it was the end of the movement phase, or even if it was the end of the hero phase, then you could do it. One little bit of clever stuff with the acorn, which I don't think you need, but might be helpful in the long run. One of the Sylvaneth battle tactics is pick a enemy model. A couple of them work around wildwood, so pick an enemy unit within 6 inches of the wildwood. Obviously, you do that at the start of your hero phase. This also happens at the start of your hero phase, so you could drop the acorn next to a unit, an enemy unit, and then go, I'm killing that one, and that would be a battle tactic. And maybe if we, as you say, we might enter a GH where they've got really hard battle tactics as opposed to just hard ones, and that might be quite worth it for that, basically. Yeah.
I can see the chat's been talking, and there's a mini debate happening in the chat. You know, if your Acorn of Ages could be a great replacement for your Tree Lord Ancient, it also might not be as good as a Tree Lord Ancient. And I think you've made some good comments about the restrictions of a 12-incher. And if you are going to use Acorn of Ages, it's really like a turn 2 and beyond type thing. So you can't do aggressively turn 1, chuck down a wood. It's much better off, holding off for at least a turn. You're in a better position. Start of the hero phase, chuck out that second wood.
Yeah, I 100%. I think, unfortunately, it's a point which is worth mentioning here. I think, unfortunately, what's better than all of these 6 is Arcane Tome.
Yeah.
Which is crap. Like I'm not a fan of the fact that I find myself the go-to artifact I'm taking is Arcane Tome, either making my Warsong a 3-caster, which if I'm casting spells through wildwoods is ridiculous, or turning my Archrev into a wizard is too good to ignore. So actually, most of the only exception to that is if I'm taking Dirthu, I'm taking Gladius, but otherwise I'm not really taking any of these 5, unfortunately. I'm taking
my Stormcast hero is taking Master of Magic and Arcane Tome, and I hate it. They should stop nerfing my dragon abilities for like the 100th time. But yeah, like I feel you when you say that they're good artifacts, but they're just not as good sometimes as universal stuff.
I think the contrast, at least, is that our command traits are incredible. I'm never thinking of taking Master of Magic. I'm never thinking of doing that. I'm always taking one of our command traits. But it is a shame that our artifacts, despite being good, just Tome's better.
You got 6 spells to choose from. What are your top 2?
Verdurous Harmony and bringing stuff back. Brilliant. As we talked about, bringing back a Current of Hunter, bringing back one of your cavalry models is incredible. Really, really strong. And then that's the go-to for me. And then lots of the other ones have got use depending on what your army is. If you're taking Tree Lords or Dirthu, Regrowth is still brilliant. Only on a 5, which is great. Heal D6 is amazing. Tree Song has now got real flex because it's 9 inches from a wildwood, a bit of rend. Problem with Tree Song is second you hit Nighthaunt, you're like, right, well, that's good. Glad I took that. What a great spell. So I think that's where Tree Song has a little bit of limitations there. And then Throne of Vines, as we mentioned just now, if you take Throne of Vines, if you take Vespral Gem, which allows you to autocast, you put that on your Tree Lord Ancient, you autocast it because it is a 9 to cast it, but then you're healing a ridiculous amount because it's heal 1 wound at the end of each phase. And remember, there's a lot of phases in each turn. So you've got hero phase, movement phase, shooting phase, charge phase, combat phase, battle shock phase. So 6 a turn you're healing. So and it's until your next hero phase. So that could give you a lot of healing. And again, in Winterleaf, that could do some work for you. And Dwellers Below, just going to briefly mention, great into Nighthaunt, because that's the counter to Tree Song. The Dwellers Below, actually, that unit of 30 Blade Geist Revenants will lose 9 Revenants to Dwellers, not right?
Yeah, the counter argument to that though is that there's a lot of armies that are running units of 5, 10, 3. So if you are going to cast it on those types of units, then you might get 1, 2 mortal wounds. Who cares? But I think
why. Sorry, why? Just very briefly, why? Just to kind of re-emphasize Alariel's value is that she's the only one who knows all 6 of them, and this is a very versatile lore, and so having someone who knows all of them is actually really good.
Yeah, and Inquisitor mentioning that, Vernus Harmony can, bring back things like, Dryads, tree revs, spite revs, and get more models back. But to your point, just putting it on a Kurnoth Hunter or one of your Seekers or your Lancers just gives so much more value than bringing back a 1 wound idiot.
Yeah.
But
agree.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. 100% agree.
And I'm not paying Laurie, by the way, to agree with me. We're just in sync. Do you like any of the grand strats, or are you finding yourself just using the battle pack?
Battle pack, I think takes what's theirs is really good for us from the battle pack, which is more in their deployment zone than they have. You've got tree revenants, you've got teleports, you've got fast units in the Arch Revenant. I think take what theirs is a really good one.
If you had to choose one of the grand strats from the book, would it be what Roots of Victory? Like, what would you choose as the one?
I think you do Roots of Victory, but I wouldn't. It will, it might be interesting in future GHs as the grand strats become harder or don't become harder. I don't know. So you might find yourself going for Roots of Victory. We talked about it a little bit in the chat, and I think it's doable. And then you see all enemy units must be more than 6 inches. Like, that's tough.
Yeah. Would you, Chris Class asking, would you take the Warsong now? And this is a bit of a spoiler on the 4 lists that you've given to us. You think that Warsong? Look, I really like the area of effect mortal wounds, so I wouldn't drop the Warsong. But where do you stand?
Yeah, I think Warsong's brilliant. I think Warsong's really, really strong. As I say, particularly with Arcane Tome and Spellsinger, I think if you take Warsong, Cogs, Arcane Tome, Spellsinger, you put them in the corner of the board, and they sit there casting 3 casts, re-rolling those casts, +1 to cast, because you can normally get yourself within 9 inches of an overgrown terrain piece, and you just whack them out of the board. I think it actually largely makes redundant the need for Aegon of the Ages, or in my opinion, the need for the Tree Lord Ancient. I know you're saying there's that whole discussion going on. I think the answer to the discussion, in my opinion, is the Warsong, basically, because with Spellsinger, he's casting up wildwoods from existing wildwoods, +1 to cast re-rolling, so it's on a 5 with a re-roll, which maths-wise is like 95% or something like that. And that's 18 inches because it's a spell, the spell we talked about from a wildwood, and is, if you put him far enough out of the way, is unlikely to be unbound. So I think Warsong is very, very good, particularly with that combo. He's still 305, so I don't think there's anything in the book, perhaps with the exception of Tree Revenants, which I'll also take because everything's a bit pricey. But yeah, I think Warsong is very good.
Yeah, so do I. Battle tactics, do you maybe just give me an overview instead of looking at every single rule and every single interaction? Do you find that you use the battle tactics often? When you do use the battle tactics, are there ones that stand out for you, obviously, other than others, or do you find yourself just sticking to the pack?
So the most recent 2-day I went to banned tome battle tactics. So of late, I've been playing without them to prep for that. They're really good. You've got one which is pretty close to auto, and then there's a lot which are quite situational. But they are worth knowing. If your tournament scene, if your local scene allows and is happy with tome battle tactics, then there's about 3 of them which I think is worth knowing, maybe 4 actually. So I think they are. As I say, there's one which is a go-to, which is Harness the Spirit Paths, which allows you to do a charge after teleporting, which is solid. But then something like Eradicate Trespasses, which is situational, because you've got to have an enemy within 6 inches of an Awakened Wildwood. But when it happens, like if they push their screen up and they've got 3 Aether Wings next to a Wildwood, like you can really pick that and go, right, I'm 100% going to do that, and I'm going to do it really casually actually, because I'm just going to cast the Warsong Rev's explosion spell and I'll just take it off. So there are definitely ones there which are doable.
Yeah, and especially like if you're building into Durthu. I mean, I think I've mentioned Durthu like 5 times already. I'm a bit of a fanboy when it comes to Durthu, but like, you know, March of the Forest Lands, if you do boost him up, and depending on the types of monsters that are being run around, you know, this one could be an easy one. But again, I guess the great thing about battle tactics is they're situational, and the fact that you don't have to choose them in advance, you just choose them as you're playing. There are some good things, but it's not like Daughters of Cain where there's just like a bunch of obvious ones to run.
Agree. And it's with March of the Forest Lords, it's worth noting that like they might be on 1 wound. Like it might be that they've got 1 manual draft on 1 wound, and then you're like, right, this is my time. So that's kind of what I mean by a lot of these. They're worth having at the back of your head. You might not use them for like 3 out of 4 games, but once in a while you'll want to crack them out.
Even like Unleashed Guy runs Wrath, like, you know, you could be chipping away at a wizard, and then you use an arcane bolt to take that final wound. You take a burning head to do some damage. You can almost be planning in advance for that.
As I say, or if you're taking Warsong Revenant and you're taking Spellsinger, then you're like, right, well, I'm going to cast my spell out of that Wildwood. You've got 3 units with 2 wounds left. I'm going to kill one of them. So yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, I dig it. Anything else you'd mention with the battle tactics? Again, like they're so situational. All right. Laurie has sent a couple of lists in. We may or may not get through all of them.
No,
we'll see how we go. We'll see how we go. But I guess what I want to do here is that, you know, you've talked a good game, Laurie, and, you know, we've gone through a bunch of ideas and thoughts around the builds, right? But if I was going to go to a tournament, I want to get into your head. What does a Laurie list look like? And as always, I want to say that this is not the list. Don't have to take this, copy and paste it, put it into best post pairings, and then this is your next tournament list. If your favorite unit is not on here, we're not saying that it's trash. We're just saying that this is how Laurie's thinking about it in this particular build. So you do you, however you want to build your list. But I guess I'm going to read out the list for the people in the podcast who can't see what's on the screen. And I'd love to hear from you. What's it all about? How does it win? What are the synergies I need to be aware of? So you've got your Arch Revenant, you've got the Warsong Revenant, which is the general with Spellsinger, Arcane Tome with Verdant Blessing, Verdurous Harmony. You've also got 3 units of Tree Revs. You've got a unit of Revenant Seekers. You've got yourself the Kurnoth Hunters with Groat Bows. You've also got Chronomatic Cogs. So that's coming in under Battle Regiment and Bounty Hunter. So, and it's obviously a Harvest Boon with the Reaping as a choice. So what's the deal here?
So you've got Revenant Seekers, which have been double reinforced. There's 9 Revenant Seekers there, and then the bows have been reinforced once. That's 6 bows. I think contrary to what you just said, I think this is the list. I think I'm sure people disagree with me, and they're wrong. This is the best, I think, best singles list at the moment of the Sylvaneth book. I'm saying that at least half tongue-in-cheek facetiously, like because it's a brilliant book. There's loads of different ways you can run it, but I think for singles, this is the most reliable build up there. I've talked about elements of it already, so I'm just going to flesh parts of it out and hopefully not spend too long on it. It's 3 drops, so you're beating a lot of things for drops, which is a really good start. Stuff which is 1 drop will outdrop you, but even if you 1 drop, you might just lose that roll off. So I'm happy with 3 drops. We've talked about the Warsong. It's got that combo I just went through there: Cogs, Spellsinger, Arcane Tome, 3 casts, just sitting in the corner and just churning out that magic, churning out woods, churning out heals, churning out damage. Like over a game, it really does its work. Really does its work quite comprehensively. Let's talk about the Tree Revenants first of all. 3 units of Tree Revenants. I think whenever you can squeeze 3 in, it's worth squeezing 3 in. It's often tempting to just go for 2 because you've gone 2 and then you've gone, well, for me, Revenant Seekers battle line. So I could have gone 2. You could go 2 and a unit of kind of hunters, or 2 and some dryads. With 3, though, they play the battle tactics so good. You can take 2 in theirs, barge through enemy lines. You can do with 2, and you can do with 2 Galatian vet units for the extra bonus point really easily. Like automatically. Like your opponent basically can't stop it. You can also do desecrate their lands, control the terrain piece. Again, retrieve events quite easily, turns 1, 2, or 3. And what's nice about having 3 units is, like, let's say, right, I get given first turn. I've been outdropped. I get given first turns. I do desecrate their lands with a unit of tree revenants. They get the double. They take off the tree revenants. I don't care because I've still got 2 tree revenants left over. Then turn 3, I do barge through enemy lines and pop them in both corners and go, right, I'm getting that. So 3 units, tree revenants just means that they just basically play the scenario for you, play your battle tactics in particular for you. They're off doing that whilst you don't have to worry. Revenant Seekers, the unit of 9, as I've spoken about, is just so good at bringing stuff back. And this is in Harvest Boon, so it gets that pre-game move. Few little bits of tech with that unit. First of all, the pre-game move you can use to get up and onto an objective. And then what's really nice, and what I've done with Prize of Gallet in particular, you move up onto an objective, you take it before the game begins, and then if you outdrop your opponent, you then give them first turn and you make it proving ground. And we've been speaking about how there's loads of lists out there which don't have any Galatian vets. They can't take it. You've taken it before the game begins. You give them a turn. You might just be tagging it with one little model, and then you go, right, yeah, that's proving ground. I played it where I played against an army of sharks and Volturnus or the king. It was king, wasn't it? Seb Donnelly's list, and he just couldn't take it. And that's that. You can't take it for 2 turns as well. Like, you can't take that in his turn and in my turn. So basically, I'm going to, right, you're down 2 points turn 1. I'm up 2 points turn 1, and there's nothing you can do about it. And you could do that for a lot of different objectives. Like if you can get up onto them with the bugs first turn, you can make it proving ground. Or if you're playing the right list, you go, right, I'm actually going to put all 9 bugs, move them up onto this objective. That's now 18 models on that for counting points. Good luck, basically. They, as I say, very tanky, come back, which is brilliant. Their damage is something to think about because they are 4s and 3s. I think they are good into into Galatian vets. And into normal units, they really struggle against monsters who can roar them, particularly high armor save monsters who can roar them, because they are just Ren 2 and Ren 1. They're only 2 damage each, and I say 4s to hit. That's what I think their weaknesses. And I think if you're playing against that, you have to concentrate on playing the mission far more, because I think you still win on mission, but they do struggle to take down big units. And again, maybe this list in the future doesn't work because the meta moves on. But yeah, like I think objectively it wouldn't have been good enough in the last GH because there's too many monsters out there. And so you will struggle there. But they are very good. 6-inch piling really helps, and they just bounce and retreat and do great work. The great bows are the element which I think is the most, like, are they worth it? Because you basically, the great bows with the Arch Revenant is 580 points. So it's a lot of points. And their damage profile is not a lot. And I was quite off on them when the book first dropped. They were one of my units which I wasn't really including into lists. But I chatted to Math Mallow about them, and I've used them on the table a couple of times. And their threat range is massive, obviously, because it's 30 inches.
Yeah.
And they're very consistent, just chipping away at stuff. And you put them in cover, either in your Wildwood or another bit of cover you can have, and there are 2-up save with 30 wounds there. They're just not getting touched. And any opponent who does go for them normally will just bounce off them, and that's great. So they can just sit there as your bunker unit, 30 inches, just pinging off. Never going to do loads of damage, but they might take off a support character. They might take off that screen, and they're doing it really reliably. I think the is a very CP heavy list. So as I said before, if you can find Damned, if you can play on a table with Damned on it and seek out that Damned, those hunters, if I've got Damned in my deployment, the hunters are just sitting next to their Damned straight away because they're just tapping at every single go. As I mentioned earlier, I'll make that Damned piece of terrain also overgrown. So I'm healing 1 wound. So I'm taking D3, so take 2, heal 1, take 2, heal 1. And they're just constantly on +1 to hit that way. And therefore I can use all that attack on the Revenant Seekers in combat phase and not be spending 2 CPs on it. quite a straightforward list. You also are 1960, which means that you are normally getting the Triumph a lot of the time, which on the Revenant Seekers, again, as I've explained, they're not that consistent in damage. So getting the +1 to wound on the Revenant Seekers for that key turn is quite big.
So you take Inspired for the +1 to wound once per game Triumph. I think there's so much value in the tree revenants. They're just being able to teleport, and like when you start playing around with them and realizing that even when they're damaged, being able to teleport 1 or 2 models around the board, claiming objectives, claiming terrain features, jumping onto proving grounds. It's very hard to zone out 1 or 2 bodies. You could always make them expert conquerors because they are GVs. So if you want to go down that route, like 2 expert conqueror, tree revs counts as 6. Very hard, and it makes them all threats as well. I love the revenants, and I think as I reflect on the revenants, I think about the fact that I've just been running 4 Stormcast dragons and I've scaled them back to 2 because I feel uncomfortable running a 700 point unit. But when I look at the differences between the dragon versus the seekers, and having to, if you don't kill the seeker in the turn, you can heal up all the wounds. You get the rally as it on a 5-up. You get the 6-inch pile-in because of the banner bearer. I can see why you'd be more confident putting 1/3 of your points into seekers, where I've been uncomfortable running 4 dragons at the same price because they're just 2 different things.
Because there's also really nice work you can do with your coherency. What I will always do is I'll have my champion and my hornblower at the back of the unit when I'm deploying defensively. I take the punch at the front. I'll break coherency. So I'll just leave my banner guy, my horn guy and my champion at the back. I'm left with just those 2, but I've taken myself out of combat. And then you're rolling 7 dice on a 5-up. You get 3 back. 2, 3 back. And then you bring 1 back through the spell, you bring 1 back on a 2-up, and suddenly you're like, oh, right, I'm at 6 or 7 already. That's great. So, yeah, there's a lot of tech going on there.
Quick question from Morgan. Do you have an opponent that maybe this would struggle against, or maybe a tougher fight than others for this particular build?
I think, I'd say it's can be tough into monsters, but I think actually you do just concentrate on the scenario instead. So like I played against Phil Marshall's Archaon list, and I can't kill Archaon basically with this list, but instead you just kill everything else. So I just went around, I killed his Vanguard, I killed all of his units, and I beat him twice because at the end of the game there was Archaon left and nobody else. So I think monsters in theory are hard, but I think you just can play the scenario better. I mean, basically, if something has got the damage to just take the Seekers off, that's when you struggle. So the 2 day I went to, the 1 game I lost was first turn. I misplayed a little bit and put the Revenant Seekers too far forward, but he put his whole army into it. 30 Sentinels, 20 Wardens, a Fox, and a Law Seeker all shot and went into it and took the Seekers off to the wound. Annoyingly, I was devastated. The final attack from Severeth. 4s, no rend, 1 damage, and I was on a 3-up save and it went through, and I think I almost broke me that. But if they can take off the Revenant Seekers, and so maybe something like I haven't played against them, but maybe Storm Fiends, for example, do it as well. Unit 9 Storm Fiends you might worry about a little bit too. Again, I think that you just have to play more cautiously, because anything which has got the damage to take out the Revenant Seekers has invested a lot into that ability, and so you then just play a different game, and you go, right, okay, well they're actually going to deploy really far back, and I'm going to use my True Revenants, I'm going to use my Warsong Rev to chip away, and I'm just going to play the scenario better than you.
Yeah. You'll mostly find that people will have to put a lot of points into removing those seekers, or they just grow back. Like it's death 101. If you don't kill that unit of 60 zombies, they grow back so quickly, and you might as well not attack them to begin with.
100%.
All right. List number 2. I hear you got a crying baby, so I'll be quick and hopefully you can help.
Did you hear that? Did you?
I can definitely hear it. It's all good. Like Laurie's just got a new bum, so I appreciate the time that you're spending with us. So we'll nut through the other list pretty quickly. Second one is a Winterleaf variety. You've got Spirit of Durthu, Alariel, Battle Mage. Your tree revs, you've got 2 units of tree revs, you've got dryads, you've got a tree lord, you've got aether wings, you've got your spite swarm hive. What's your season of war for this one?
This would be 6-up war save, so it would be reaping.
Cool. Under Winterleaf. So how's this one compared
So
to the other? Obviously, you got a lot more hero focus here with Durthu and Alariel.
This is my clever one. This is my a chap called Tom Bastian has been running it down in Dorset because I had a chat with him and said this is what I quite like. I think it's really clever, but I think perhaps it relies too much on Hive and the Battle Mage getting off. But you've got a Durthu there who can tag stuff in place and is nulled, so will just grind out, doing loads of damage as well. The Tree Lord, as we mentioned previously, can keep things 3 inches away from them, and again, they can't retreat. Alariel, I think, is really good in Winterleaf because, as we mentioned before, she heals so much, and when you do kill her, she comes back. So you can push her into stuff, going right. If I win the roll off, then she's just going to heal back, and you can't retreat from me. But if you do eventually kill her, then she's just going to come back later in the game. So I don't really mind that. So this is why I will try to get it to the table soon because I think it's really clever, and I think it's actually quite hard to play against because you can be tagged in so many different ways. I think the issue is that as I say, it does rely a little bit too much on spells, perhaps, and spells going your way. But I do think it's a really cool list and shows a little bit. The reason I asked for us to talk about the list shows a little bit about this is very different from the last list I showed you. Very, very different from the last list. So it shows that you can go in different routes of it. And if you want to take this where you're taking 3 big models and kind of pinning people in place and jumping around the board, I think it does show you can do that.
Quick question on the Spite Swarm Hive. Do you find yourself using the Vital Venom or the Shielding Swarm? Obviously, again, situational.
But the Ignoring Rend, annoyingly, the Ignoring Rend has taken a bit of a nerf, and now that's only can be activated in your hero phase. So I think you're always taking +3 to charge and +3 to move. It's still good. Hive is still good. It's the issue you've got is that it's a spell which you have to cast, not be unbound, and then you've got to roll that 2 up. And I think it's why it's hard to build a whole strategy around it, is because that turn you really needed to go off, you roll a 1 on that 2 up. And that's tough. So like this list, for example, I really like this list. I think it's got real potential. I think it's very clever and very techy. But like that turn, you're like, right, Durthu, I'm just going to teleport to here. I'm going to charge, and he'll clear that and tag that. And then the Battle Mage rolls a double 1 for the charge spell. You roll a 1 for your Hive, and you're like, right, well, that tactic's not going to work now. It's worth noting with Alariel, she once per game can make all terrain features overgrown, which is really lovely and really works with this list because that turn where you need Durthu to get in and get out, you just go, right, everything's overgrown. He's charging from, all that tactics I was talking about earlier on where you're like, get within 3 inches of terrain pieces. You can't get within 3 inches of every single terrain piece. And so Alariel just turns it on for a turn. Durthu then does his thing, and you're like, right, that I needed to go off, and it has gone off. So I think it's a really clever list, and as I said, it shows what you can do with Winterleaf, that you can have Durthu on a 3-up ethereal save, often with a 6-up ward save, Alariel healing 2d6 each turn, the Tree Lord Ancient pinning things in place and keeping them outside of, keeping them at 3-inch range. Like, there's lots of flex here.
Yeah, I like it. Do you have? This is the first list you've included Dryads. The last one, it was all 3 tree brands. This one, why does Dryads come to the picture? Obviously, because points, you're almost at 2K here.
Yeah, points. That's it. If I had 5 points more, there'd be Tree Revenants. As I said before, I think in this current edition, Dryads they're still good. They're still really good. But in this current edition, in this current GH, I would rather have Tree Revenants, basically.
I will defend the Dryads a little bit, right? They get the -1 to hit and -1 to wound if they're wholly within 9 inches of that overgrown terrain or the wildwoods. If they're obviously in cover, they'd be on 4-up saves. So that's going to be a lot of damage to try to get rid of the Dryad unit.
They're definitely good. I do think actually in 10s they still do that. Like in the past, before they even had -1 to wound, I've had Marathi charge 10 of them and not wipe them. Because those minuses to hit can just play with your averages something terrible. And like anything which is 3s and 3s, suddenly go into 4s and 4s. Just that not frequently, but once in a while they will whiff. And at that point, you are screwed.
And there's so little way to improve a wound roll. So the -1 to wound can be devastating. It can be devastating for your opponent. So Yeah, no, I like this one, and obviously got the Aether Wings there, so they're cheap screens, they're objective scorers, coming in from Stormcast as well. Yeah, I like it a lot. I feel like the Battle Mage, though, it might be a little bit redundant. Like if you're going to have +3 from the Spite Swarm Hive,
but you're not going to have +3, are you? Because you're going to fail to cast it. You're going to have it unbound. You can have it dispelled. You're going to roll that one. It's redundancy. And then what's nice about it is that when it does go off, I think it's a sign of redundancy, because like a 6 with a reroll is a 90% charge, but you're still going to fail that occasionally. 4 with a reroll is pretty much guaranteed.
So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that was the point that I was going to make, is that you either have a bunch of redundancies. You go from a 6-inch charge is relatively achievable. It's more than statistical average, but at the same time, making it a +5 between the Battle Mage and the Spite Swarm Hive makes it almost a guarantee. If one of those fails, you've still got a good chance to do what you want to do. Alternatively, if one of them goes off, the other one could go somewhere else and improve two things.
Definitely.
And the +5, if you get both of them off, may mean that you don't spend the CP to re-roll the charge, that you could spend somewhere else. So, how you use your resources.
Yeah, and you've got Dirthy, who's got a 3-inch range on that weapon, and if you've got +5 to charge, you might roll an 11 naturally. That's a 16-inch charge with a 3-inch range, and like that thing and you might be determined you made all the terrain overgrown, so that thing which they thought was really safe, you've gone. That's without the piling, isn't it? So you've gone all the way around. You've got a 19-inch threat range on that. Gone all the way around, killed their key thing with Dirthy, and then he's gone out of there anyway because Valerial's made everything overgrown. So I really like this list. This is the list which I thought I would run, and then was like, oh, I'm too much of a coward because it relies on spells too much.
If you cast Levitate, does Levitate only on the caster, or can you make something else levitate? I'm just wondering.
I don't know whether or not a Battle Mage can take Levitate. I don't, because it's an ally. I don't think it can, but I don't know.
I was just thinking, like, if you did hit that 16-inch charge, for example, and if you had Levitate, then imagine Dirthu on this massive charge, flying over a screen, getting into anything that it wants.
Because it's not a big base either, so it could definitely squeeze in. Yeah.
No, if you had fly, but obviously you'd have to get it onto the War Scroll.
Yeah.
Third list is the Harvest Boon Reaping list, which is the Warsong Revenant. Yay! And we have the Underworld's Warband. I'm not going to try to.
I think I've told you the wrong thing. I think this is Heartwood, actually. Sorry. So this is Paul Buckler's list, which I borrowed to talk about because again I wanted to show 3 different lists, and this is a very different list again, because you've got 12 sides. And so here, Paul's running it, obviously not me, but you've got 2 big threat ranges, threats there, and you're teleporting about the board. One's hitting, whilst the other one's chilling, and then you're coming out again. But even if they deal with 1/6 sides, even if let's say for the battle tactic or whatever, you have to leave 6 up there, you've still got the other 6, which does work basically, and that's. How many was that? 60 wounds? Yeah, 60 wounds with a 3-up save. It's tough.
So, comment in the chat from Jonathan is the Guardians. I'm literally pulling up the War Scroll because I haven't seen this. So, what on earth? So what we're talking about here is one of the Underworld's warbands. Unfortunately, it's not Skate's Hunt. I'd be much more excited if we were using our little centaur friend. But what does this Underworld's warband? Is it Yuthari? I don't know. The Guardians. Which is the hero.
There's a few elements to this. First of all, Skate's Wild Hunt is probably better. I think Skate's Wild Hunt has got real game in the new book, but that's a separate point. Paul's taking Yuthari because he wants his 3 heroes. So he wants to have 3 heroes so he can take the extra, additional enhancement. So he wants to double spells because you can see that with the Warsong Revenant has got Tree Song and Verdurous Harmony. Ilthari comes with a free unit, her Guardians, which is handy as well. And if you could get the models, it would be Hunt anyway.
Yeah, Paul's just mentioned in the chat that if you could get the Hunt, Skate's Hunt, we would swap it. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Ilthari.
Keep going.
Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce it. So it's quite. I think the reason why I wanted to talk about Paul's list is in part because it's showing again you've got 12 hunters here, different route you want to go, but it also shows that even in Athari, still got game. Everything in the book has got game. As I say, Scace Wild Hunters got real game too. They are quite hard to find. I think they're out of stock for GW. So I bought mine about 2 years ago when I thought I was going to include them before.
A whole bunch of them have just come back, actually. So check.
Okay.
I believe. Yeah. We literally, my game store literally just got a whole bunch of like the Gits one, and there's a whole bunch of them just come back. But I do want to interrupt this one because Thomas Berger's mentioned a good comment as well. Is no arch rev with the hunters. So you've gone in and got 2 units of 6 Kurnoth hunters. So 1,000 points, literally half the army. Why no arch rev? Is that a bit of a risk?
Yeah, I think you probably do need one in the list. As I say, this is Paul's list, which I know is a work in progress for him. So I think you probably do drop Ilfari, unfortunately, and then maybe you because then you could put in you drop Athari, then you've got 220 points. Put in an arch rev, you've got 100 points spare, and then if you drop the skull route, then you can put in Scace Wild Hunt as well. So there's definitely flex in these lists, but it shows what the options are.
Paul also saying in the chat that
it doesn't keep up
it's hard
which I think is really valid. I think there's a really good point to make here that this is part of it not working like it used to work. You are hitting and retreating, and so when you're looking at arch rev and kind of hunters, do think about that factor that if you move your arch revenant to within 12 of the hunters, which you need for +1 to wound and +1 to hit, so +1 attack, then they teleport out. Your arch rev is sat there in front of your opponent's army by himself. He's getting killed. Yeah. I'm going to have to wrap up shortly.
It's all good. It's all good. That's all good.
I think if we the final list was just proof that you can still this list I've basically ran since the first book. So this is with a little tweak. You can still basically, if you want to just take a layer on Kurnoth Hunters with Scythes, you can still do that. So the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Laurie, I'm not letting you go with one final question, and then we can disappear. How do I beat you? Sylvaneth is causing havoc on the table. How on earth do I win against Sylvaneth?
So I think that we've talked a lot about it as we've gone through, haven't we? It's tagging up those terrain pieces. But the big thing which we haven't spoken about, get in their face. You've got to play really aggro into Sylvaneth, which I think a lot of people don't do, and think, right, what I'll do is I'll sit back, I will play the scenario, I take the hit, but it just doesn't work. Like if your opponent's got something good like 6 Scythes or whatever, you just will find yourself losing too much, basically. And with Tree Villains, they can still play the scenario to an extent without committing too much. So that's the big thing. Is if I think Iron Jaws, for example, I think I saw Christine earlier saying that they have quite a tough time of it at times. I think that also, if you play it right, can be a really good counter into Sylvaneth, because you take your Maw Crusher, you move them right into your opponent's army. You do the same with your pigs. You do the same with exactly, Christine. Yeah, exactly. You just got to go fully into them, and then you find yourself basically going, right, I've killed enough of your screens, I've killed stuff, and then if you win that priority, then you just take everything out. Because you're in their face, because it is an elite army with not a lot of models,
and you can't strike and fade in your enemy's turn, so it's only in your turn.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. So just get in their face. The alternative, as Paul says as well, magic. If you can shut down the magic, then a lot of these armies. I think that, as I say, I think my bug build has got game, even if you do shut down my magic. Like, that's why I've gone that route, is because I think if I don't want to be reliant on magic, and that build isn't reliant on magic. But a lot of the builds which everyone's kind of saying, look, this is terrible, I hate this is so OP, it's reliant on magic. So if you've got Nagash, or if you've got Teclis, or if you've got an Incanter, which you mentioned earlier, like any of those offer really big outs.
Awesome. Laurie, this has been incredible. I want you to go back to your family. Thank you for all your wisdom. Your Twitter handle is below, so people go follow Laurie, go follow the journey, and I'd love to hear in the comment section, how are you thinking about Sylvaneth? Is there the units that maybe we have underestimated, or maybe overinflated, or maybe is there a defense on the other bugs that maybe we should be thinking about? Let me know in the comment section. Laurie, thank you so much. You are an absolute gentleman and a scholar. I can't wait for the Sylvaneth Battletome 4, where I get you back.
Lovely. A pleasure as usual, Coach.
All right. Cheers, folks. Thanks for everyone joining us. Thank you, Laurie. And until next time, don't forget your triumph. thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. If you did, I would love it if you press like on the video, as well as left me a comment to let me know what your thoughts are. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the video description. I want to give a massive shout out as well to the AOS Coast Patreons and YouTube members who are going in, and the funds of supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you're all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a 1 on a redeploy.